Oh, it is on. Finally, welcome to Break the Rules, breaktherules.tv. I'm your host, Lev Polyakov, at LevPo on Twitter, and today we are sowing discourse with Chaos Prime. Or I don't know if you want to go by Chaos, just Chaos or Chaos Prime, whichever
And just
one.
chaos is fine. Yeah.
Excellent, Chaos. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we also have
Thanks for having me.
Simon DiDio, and Simon's going to be sitting in over here. And later on, we're going to get more into the academic side because you are part of Carnegie Mellon University.
That's right.
Very
And
fancy.
can you tell us real quick what it is that you are studying before we go back to chaos and start to sow the discourse?
Sure. I'm in a funny department. We're kind of the intersection of economics, psychology, cognitive science. We run a thing called the Laboratory for Social Minds. We study large-scale behavior in the human animal.
Perfect. I think this fits
Cool.
right in. So, Chaos Prime, you, on the other hand, are a cognitive arms dealer. Can you please tell us what cognitive arms dealing is all about? And of course, we got the great Giovanni Pennicietti. Mwah, of course.
I'm always here.
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I can probably do that. What I really mean by being a cognitive arms dealer is that I want to empower people using cognitive mechanisms. I want to find ways that people are being blocked or disempowered by things in cognitive spaces, by which I specifically don't mean linguistic spaces. Like the identification of language with cognition is one of the worst things about society. But I like to explore things like, occult weirdness and like, I don't know, odd corners of things, and try and find little fortune cookies. I'm definitely one of those tweet like a fortune cookie type motherfuckers that will in some way maybe have a chance of getting somebody a perspective that is useful to them in some way. And a lot of this is reliant on a chaos theory perspective, where sensitive dependence on initial conditions means that there is no factor so small that it is reliably insignificant. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is give there just to have there be a chance of getting just the right thing in front of just the right person at just the right time to make something good happen. And kind of hoping that some of the weird junk in my hindbrain will be able to guide me to putting that out there in just the right way. And part of what I'm doing by billing myself as an arms dealer is arms dealers are, they're horrible people, right? They deal to both sides in a conflict. They love it when the conflict escalates. They're not a good person who's on the right side, who's like, only gonna, do the right thing for the right people. And that's very much me. Like, everybody's welcome. Everybody who wants to come pick up any of these cognitive arms can do so. And that's it. Sorry? What's that?
Go on, Gio.
No, well, I was gonna ask like a question, but yeah. If I cut you off, I'm very sorry.
Oh no, I was. Oh damn it! I was just going to ask, what do you see as being some of the negative patterns? I mean, obviously we see a lot of them today, but if you can point at just a couple, what are some of the biggest things that are grinding your gears about the way people communicate today and the patterns their minds form?
Things are grinding my gears. Wow, it's like I tweet about like just that kind of thing all the time, and right now I can't think of anything.
Well, because you can't think of anything, I'm going to ask everybody to subscribe right now. For all the people who are not subscribed, including the strange person over here from Periscope. I thought Periscope's dead now. Apparently, it's still going. Really strange.
Yeah, it's a huntology on Twitter. So
absolutely,
it's an interesting position. We have we actually have a fourth person.
We
sorry,
do,
fifth.
yeah.
We have ZHP, friend of the show,
yes.
Lovecraft, who's going to stream snipe in the comments. So, but I think it's interesting, and hopefully, maybe Jules can make it. Hopefully, I think it's interesting because we have two guests that are both people of importance that I feel that, we should do with Professor Simon a sewing discourse one time. But I wanted to ask you, Chaos, you mentioned two things of interest that maybe both of you can speak on. Also, like, I wanted to get to the distinction between rationalism and neo-rationalism, and please do not dumb it down for me. But
or I'll kill you.
Or I'll kill you. But
as is tradition.
yeah, but number one would be this connection or rather the distinction between consciousness and language itself, and how the correlation, or rather the arising of both, has been disastrous. I remember reading this green text about how Noam Chomsky basically ruined linguistics. But another thing too would be, before that, just give a general overview of your definition of chaos theory, because it seems that chaos, especially chaos mathematics, it had like a new agey connotation in the 90s, Ralph Abraham with the trilogues with Terence McKenna, the butterfly flapping. It's kind of like Chuang-Tzu, like in Don Cho, does he dream of the butterfly? But what is the more serious grounding behind chaos theory? And at least in you and Professor Simon's, rigmarole of what immediately comes to mind when you think of chaos?
Well, here's what immediately comes to mind for me, Gio.
Oh God!
Do it. What comes to mind, Lev? Come on.
No, it's on the screen. I don't know if you have speaker view or gallery view. So if you have gallery view, then you get to see the Discord chat. By the way, I really appreciate all the questions in the Discord, including from Zero HP. It's about Bronze Age mindset, so we're going to get to that question as well. And also, if you are not Zero HP, send us super chats.
Well,
in fact, if you are Zero HP, send us super chats too.
Well, Evo's sake, I think, inevitably will come up in this conversation.
Yes, and for those who don't know the character that I posted over here, this is Chaos from Sonic Adventure, from the Sonic Adventure series. So there we go. That's my definition of chaos. He was like this guy who was like the guardian of the chaos, like the Master Emerald. Why am I talking about this? Anyway, Chaos, go on.
Chaos Emeralds?
Yes, the Chaos Emeralds. God, don't make me go down this road, please.
So what you're saying, Lev, is that for you, chaos is about how you got to go fast. That's what I'm hearing here.
Well, there's a technique called chaos control where you can use the Chaos Emeralds to teleport.
Well, as Paul Virilio said, when we reach total speed... never mind. I'm not even going to finish that.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. What are my big takeaways from chaos theory? I mean, obviously, sensitive dependence on initial conditions is a key thing there. Like just the fact that in complex dynamical systems, our intuition and really the foundation of a lot of our large scale modeling for most of the 20th century at least, and, in various ways continuing on, is based on the idea that small factors are going to drop out. That you can just look at the big trends, and that's just going to swamp everything. And what people in the chaos and complexity fields found was that is absolutely not the case. That small factors can cascade and compound. And obviously the butterfly effect, which is one of the things that my avatar there is referring to. Shaped like a butterfly, which also means it's shaped like a Lorentz attractor, which is one of the classic cool images coming out of chaos theory, illustrating one of the first strange attractors discovered. Another is where strange attractors and every other kind of attractor lives, which is phase space modeling, which is just a endlessly useful way of thinking about systems, just spaces where each dimension of the space is a degree of freedom of the system. I don't know. I mean, fractals are cool. Who doesn't like fractals? Who doesn't like self-similarity? I mean, internet traffic engineers don't like self-similarity because, that's one of the best known properties of internet traffic is that it's self-similar, which means that it's incredibly hard to provision capacity. But other than them, other people like self-similarity. I don't know what else.
Well, there was this owl mask picture that I posted, which is
Yeah,
similar
that's a
to
Lawrence
the one.
tractor.
Yeah. And when it comes to fractals, I was having a conversation yesterday on our BTR Discord. By the way, for anybody who is not a member of that Discord, it is in the description of this video, right at the top. Please go there, become a member. But anyway, in Discord, we were talking about the fractals that one would see when they would have a psychedelic experience, like whether it's under DMT or LSD or even cannabis. Like I had experiences seeing multiple fractal animations just by smoking a joint. But what's interesting to me here is like the images that people have had, and this may be going a little bit off topic, but I'm still curious about it. The images that people have had in their heads of elves, fairies, gnomes, various blood drinking demons in Tibetan Buddhism, like these are pictures that have been drawn of, you know, pretty like realistic looking, well, relatively realistic looking creatures, but not like an Alex Gray painting. You know, like an Alex Gray painting would have all these fractals again and like a little thing inside of a bigger thing, but these traditional paintings didn't have any fractalization whatsoever. So I'm just curious about what exactly people experience, and I don't know if you have personally done psychedelics, if this is something that you are interested in. Well, let me ask you that first then, just so we kind of set it up. Have you done psychedelics before?
Yeah, LSD, psilocybin.
So, under LSD and psilocybin, did you notice these repeating fractals?
I don't
Not so.
remember anything. Well, nothing leapt out at me as being, I don't know, particularly, fractal in nature. I mean,
The reason why I bring this up is people, when they are in this psychedelic state, a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot of time, but a lot of the images that people bring back, you know, drawing these elves and whatever, they have this psychedelic fractal architecture. And these are
yeah,
supposed to be reminiscent of a lot of these fairy stories, people talking about seeing
yeah.
these extra dimensional creatures. And what I'm curious about here is what exactly is the, you know, the clearer truth, if there is one, when it comes to whether these are creatures that are experienced as these psychedelic fractal thought forms, or whether this is just what they look like to a lot of Americans and Amazonians who happen to do these particular psychedelics, and whether there is some kind of a construction that we can find the more we meditate and the more we engage in a lot of these spiritual practices that'll give us a better idea of what's going on. Because again, like, I don't want to go all new age here, but I think it does come down a lot to sacred geometry, and I think sacred geometry and fractalness interact with each other in a very interesting way
Yeah.
to create a lot of these forms. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this as well.
I actually have a lot of thoughts on this. I don't know if we should necessarily divert into them just now, but
Yeah, we could save it a little bit for later. We can have that be as a cliffhanger for the people who are curious about it so that they are going to stick around. So let's save that a little bit for later. Let's go back to the original question that I asked, which is, how do you negatively react, or what are the specific things that make you negatively react to the way that people's minds work today, now that you've had a little bit more time to
it's some more time to think about completely
yes,
stuff.
exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that I guess routinely pisses me off the most is people participating in systems poorly. Like one of the things that I find most appealing about like the culture of New York City, for example, is that like people will consistently like spend 1 second of their time to save you 3 seconds of theirs of yours. If there isn't a scarcity situation involved, like they'll hold the door for you because you'll also hold the door for them. Like everybody is willing to pay a little cost that doesn't there's no competition involved. that makes everything work more smoothly. But if there's scarcity, if it's if there's one seat left on the subway, then they'll stab you to get that. But if there is no scarcity, then you get a lot of this like low key systemic operation smoothing behavior. But then you've got somebody who like stands in the middle of the sidewalk to check their phone instead of pulling out to the side, or like other random random little things like that disproportionately bother me. Like there are so many positive sum games that can be played with the systems that we all participate in, that like people seem to arbitrarily like playing them as zero sum or negative sum. Just bugs me. Like, yeah.
But also, that's the system's problem itself, right? Because I'm thinking of just the nature of the city itself being almost like an organism that has to rely on a certain number of set theories or interactions in order to achieve certain flows of productivity, whatever metric that may be. So I'm wondering, just like thinking in the abstract, what is it when people is behaving badly in the card example, yes. There you go, is behaving badly within a particular system? Is that something that is just for purely out of ennui or disruption, or the need to see things burn, or is there sort of another aspect to why people participate badly in whatever given system? Is there something that could perhaps lead to, and I know creative destruction is sort of like a meme, it's sort of like, it's debatable whether it's real, especially in a market system, but do you think that there's something else driving why people quote unquote behave badly within a given context of a system?
I think there's a thousand different reasons, from just lack of awareness to like preoccupation, just whatever input they're dealing with is too high amplitude for it just drowns out other considerations. And sometimes people are fucking pissed off, like one of the features of the kinds of systems that we're doing is that they hurt. Like they are painful to participate in because they are significantly alien to the biological structures that we are built of. So adapting and like adaptation hurts. Change is painful. So people generally have a fair amount of that to be pissed off about.
Have you seen the documentary series Can't Get You Out of My Head? I know, Gio, you were talking about that earlier. I haven't seen the full thing, but I'm up to episode 3 now. And they are talking about how a lot of the people who ended up moving to the suburbs, to have this family unit structure, they felt pretty isolated. And that's when Valium started coming on the rise. And it was selling like hotcakes. All the housewives reading that stuff up. But then even the husbands started getting into the act. So and I think that was the Sackler, the patriarch of the Sackler family, who then went on to make Oxys and all the stuff a lot of the Americans know and love today, unfortunately. So I don't know, it does not seem like a stable system, but at the same time, it seems like a lot of people are too tired, to just overexerted by all the information that they're being bombarded by, that they just want to sit down and do nothing. So like I don't see there being some kind of a revolution. I mean, kids go out, I also wonder if we would have had the same BLM protest going on in the same way that they were this past summer, if not for the ability to have it all be captured. Like, how much do you think that reward mechanism also plays a role in young people during 2020 going out?
Yeah, sure. Seeing representation, like knowing that what you're doing is visible, that's one of the many ways that things get to feel meaningful for people.
But do you think there's going to be a certain point where it's going to, if it hasn't already, start to morph into something that right now we would look at it and just be completely disgusted by it. Like, would there be a return to certain things that we would be considered, that would be considered to be absolutely abhorrent? I don't know. Like, I'm thinking like the Roman Colosseum, where they brought in like the poor lions and were killing the lions and doing all the all the stabbing with the swords of the gladiators. I don't know. Like, that just seems so far away from our reality today. Like,
is it that far? Like, one of the things I always think about in this kind of topic is like, old cyberpunk stories where like, the stand-up routines are basically just like people going up on stage and driving nails into their heads and whatnot, like self-mutilating for for a moment of the communal attention. And
that
like,
already happens, by the way.
yeah, and we have plenty of that going on. We're doing lots of that. There's lots of self-mutilation for attention going on.
Well, there was I was about to say Woody Allen. There was G.G. Allen back in the day. Imagine if Woody Allen played G.G. Allen, by the way.
Oh my
But bite it,
God.
you scum. That would be a fun
some
movie.
Weird,
That would be pretty amazing.
No, it's still not too late. He's still around. It's still not too late to do that. But yeah,
well,
like,
I guess like that leads to the question of like rational agency and why there is an existence of like a Thanatoic sort of metric in society. Why do people feel destruction itself is something? Is that not like a violation of like a pure, I don't know, rational choice metric or something like that? So I don't
Pure
know.
rationality.
Yeah.
Never touch the stuff.
well, I am kind of curious then if we could go into the whole rational versus, I was about to say super rational because of that whole super straight thing that's going on right now. Well, what was it? Post-rational?
Neo-rational.
Neo-rational. Thank you, Jay.
I don't know what the neo-rationalists are about. I mostly hang about with the post-rads, but yeah.
Okay, post-rational. Okay, so can you explain what post-rational is versus the the rationalists of the Slater Star Codex, as I like to call it?
I mean, Slate Star Codex. I found it interesting actually. The last time that Scott Alexander was the rationalist who came to mind, not Eliezer Yudkowsky. That was kind of amazing to me because because Big Yud is the center of like internet rationalism to me. So the fact that Scott has gotten so much visibility is very pleasing because I like Scott a lot better than I like Yud. So
I think a lot of people like Scott.
Well, who is Yud for those who don't know, which would be me.
Oh, Eliezer Yudkowsky is I don't know. He was the guy who started Less Wrong with Robin Hanson back in the day, I guess, and like I don't know, got a bunch of AI risk, paranoia going, and I don't know. He's done a bunch of stuff. He wrote like this book called The Sequences that is a bunch of basically sequences of posts off of Less Wrong that are like people love and are like, yay, this is so great. Eliezer Yudkowsky is teaching us to think better and so on. And I mean, he has a lot going for him, but like, I don't know, he kind of rubs me the wrong way. But yeah, like in a lot of ways to me, post-rats are like kind of rationalist proximate people who are sick of Eliezer Yudkowsky in a lot of ways.
Oh, wait, what's this over here?
Super rat.
There you go. This is my rough representation of super rational as opposed to purely or simply rational. There you go.
Oh, wow.
Go on. Sorry, I'm just trolling over here.
But like Yudkowsky, I mean, big Bayesian reasoning fanboy. I don't know.
What is Bayesian reasoning? You have to understand. We have to keep in mind that there are stupid people like myself here that don't know a lot of this stuff. So
I don't want to explain rationalism.
No, well, Bayesian. What is Bayesian?
Okay, like Bayesian probability, Bayesian reasoning is based on basically like evaluating propositions based on an idea of your priors about the probabilities of each possible outcome or whatever whatever's on the then side of the if then or the process versus the like in a risk, cost benefit analysis kind of way, evaluating like what the values of the possible outcomes are. So basically, like you want to pay the most attention to outcomes that have a like the highest like probability weighted by your priors versus the valence of the outcome. So like if something is like very likely according to what you're bringing to the table with what you think about the situation, and would be like very good or very bad, then like that should be high up on your list of things to address in some fashion, whether you're going to like try to pursue that or you're going to try to mitigate the risk, so on. And like things that are relatively unlikely, you don't need to deal with unless they're like incredibly bad. But that's where we get into things where like maybe we would come in with prior saying that the likelihood of a runaway AI like turning everything into fucking paper clips is relatively low, but it would be extremely bad. So the fact that it's that bad means that we should pay some fucking attention to it. Like even though it's not necessarily something we're saying like, yeah, that's definitely going to happen, kind of thing. For example, and that's
that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, I could go for something
yeah,
like
no,
that.
I mean, yeah, and Bayesianism fucking works, and like it's a formalization of the kind of reasoning structure that the basic neural architecture of your brain does all the time. And I made a shit post about this once that I almost hope made it in front of Yudkowsky at some point and pissed him off because it sounded like it might have. He like said something pissy at some point.
Excellent.
But yeah.
And by the way, people are saying post rats. So here is a nudist beach rat that my father drew. So I just want to share that with you guys.
Furry erotica.
God.
And by the way, Ostaf is here with us. Thank you very much, Ostaf, for coming in, buddy. I appreciate it. So
hey, how's it going?
It's going great. So we had also Zero HP. He is still in the chat, and I am going to address some of his questions. But first, Zero HP had that wonderful argument back in the day about rationalism, where he was talking about the quokkas. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting how that same example was used by Moldbug later on. I'm not saying they're the same person. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that no. But what I am saying is that there seems to be a pushback on, let's say, more reactionary circles online to the idea of rationalism as a whole, where I think, again, people looking at Bronze Age mindset, things like that, people, I guess we were talking about Revenge of the Nerds earlier on, and how now there seems to be more of this feeling of, I'm not a nerd, and the nerds are the ones who ruined everything, so instead I'm going to listen to my gut, and I'm going to listen to my heart, and a lot of this rationalism is just going to destroy us in the end. What would you say to that?
What, to
this general notion that people are describing.
We only want to be vitalists. We only wish to
yes,
let our energies flow and so on. I mean, I think to some extent, there's an element of the heart being in the right place there. Like, suppressing our native energies and passions is a great error of like rational culture in a lot of ways. But I think that the tools of rationality are very useful and important, and forging those together with these vital energies is that's if you want to actually get any shit done, like that's what you should be doing. Like you really I mean, do not need to be just like going out and like I don't know, hyping yourself up until you like punch a cop and whatever the fuck, like
yeah, or like punch a horse,
or a horse,
horse.
Like don't punch horses. Like burning blazing saddles was not like any kind of like didactic exercise here. Yeah.
And when it comes to the other guests over here, since it is 6:30, I want to open it up to Simon and to Ostaf. So, Simon, regarding a lot of this talk about rationalism and then vitalism kind of going against it and just like all these things going on right now, as somebody who is part of the academia industrial complex or whatever it is that you want to call, what has been your view looking at things going on in the more underground online circle? I mean, look, it's not the fucking dark web, but you know what I mean. Just like people who are, speaking truth to power in their own way on the internet. Some have been purged recently because that whole Twitter thing. I don't want to get into it right now, but we all know what we're talking about here. But in
This
general,
also goes to information, like what we were saying before about
yeah.
of cognition itself being under threat by certain forces of not just censorship, but also the curation of you meant like with Bayesian reasoning. I mean, this is the basic fundamental of like AI programming as well, or machine learning. So what happens when basically everything that you're seeing online and elsewhere, everything you shop for is being filtered through algorithms that project certain outcomes or rather guide you towards certain outcomes? What does that mean also for the nature of thought itself and how we live in a society
and how
with
certain
bluntly-
people like the Bronze Age pervert fans are being led by Caribbean algorithms.
It means that when you live long in a society also lives in you.
well, there you go.
That's a good place to begin. Yeah. No, it's very interesting to watch the Yudkowsky Bay Area rationalism, right? Sort of take over a chunk of whatever nerd space. It's from the greetings from the cathedral, right? Speaking from the cathedral, it's an interesting heresy, right? It's like you take one book, out of probably the Old Testament, and you read it and reread it obsessively, and so that it just watching. People actually form self-help groups, like this is the new version of EST, right? San Francisco is, I remember, when I first started working on these groups, I talked to a friend of mine and I said, look, after, 2 years of work, I've discovered there are cults in California. And, after another year, I was like, they use LSD to control people, right? So, this is how long it takes academia to catch up.
We need the right-wing Eastland Institute right now. So there you go.
Right, exactly, yeah. And of course, the other thing is, I think it's best to think of Yudkowsky and I don't mean to speak against him personally or to him personally, just this representation. I think Foucault is perhaps the right lens here, right? This is a discourse. It's a discourse that doesn't really locate itself in any particular person. And it's primarily, I would say, disciplinary regime, right? So what I noticed, and I'm going to speak informally, right? What I noticed is that people use this to structure their lives in a regulatory way, right? To set boundaries on, what they can think and how they think and where they think. So it's like these straight back chairs. And so people are sitting in straight back chairs and think, oh, this is going to make, this is going to improve my posture, right? The other thing I noticed, and again, this is just informally, right? When I would go visit these places, and many, how do I put this? Many wonderful people in these places, many great gentlemen and ladies in these places. There was this question like, what are we improving our posture for, right? We're going to think more rationally, but what's the win? And so this was something that, people really struggled with. Yudkowsky, God bless this guy, right? It's like, oh, the win is saving humankind from this like imagined apocalypse that I've just generated, right? And that's great, right? So, that's super altruistic. It's, certifiable, but at least, this is a person with a good soul, stranded in minus Mario world, like minus world. I think I noticed was like a huge interest in this whole pickup artist scene. This was really weird, right? So I show up and I know I've got my, East Coast, sports code, right? And someone's like, oh, you're peacocking. And I'm like, I'm sitting in this like most rational space of all time. And I'm like, wait a second, like this, I've done research on this, but this is weird, right? Who knew? So that was part of it. Power, seasteading, the Peter Thiel universe. But there was this gap, right? And the gap is in part okay, Bayesian reasoning, what is it? Like, Lev, you asked this question, right? That it's a story about how to compose your beliefs together so that you never contradict yourself. First of all, that's a good question. Is that a reasonable goal in life, right? I'm not sure. Is self-consistency a reasonable goal? You might think of this as the most horrifying thing to be held to your prior states of mind. But one of the things that's also missing, it's like, this is what you believe. But then there's this other question in folk psychology, like, what do you want, right? So
Yeah.
this is this big gap. And I think, you talk about people going bananas on the internet.
That, yeah, it's like,
Right,
what's behind
okay.
the object, yeah. So,
Yeah. What is that thing? I mean, okay, Gio, I think this is Lacan, right? I this is way, above my pay grade. But
oh, don't worry. Most Lacanians have never read Lacan, so it's all right. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's
they're like Marxists.
There you go.
Yeah, right. Have you read volume 8 of Das Kapital? But yeah, so I think that's maybe what's driving people mad on the internet is not the problem of reason, but the problem of desire, I think.
Oh,
and that's what I saw. I mean, look, there was this discipline of thought, and I mean, I'll just tell you some wonderful stories. So there's really good people, but I remember the first time I was out there, we went to a Chinese restaurant and there was like 30 people, and they're kind of grad student vibe. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm going to get stuck with this check. I know it. I'm going to get stuck with the check. And then at the end, everyone's like, all right, we're going to pull out. And they you pull out your quantum random number generator and they pick someone at random to pay the bill. And, in expectation value, you split the bill. So there's sort of these wonderful moments in which they transpose a chunk of, 1970s statistics into lived experience. That's fine. But then this next stage, which is, okay, now supposedly Yudkowsky has given you superpowers equivalent to a real world Harry Potter. So what are you going to wish for? And that's when the neo rats and the post rats and the NRX crew, that's when things get psychoanalytically very revealing, maybe, Gio, I'd say that.
Oh yes, very so. Well, even
when you start trying to learn how to want.
And sometimes when you want something that bad, then you'll start crafting a whole world, Weltanschauung around that desire itself.
One of my favorite passages is, it's a rare condition this day and age to read any good news on a newspaper page. Love and tradition of the grand design. Some people say it's even harder to find.
What lyric, or where is that from?
That's from the, for those who don't know, that's from the Family Matters theme song.
Oh my God! Well, it's true. I mean,
but it's actually interesting.
Philadelphia, born and bred. Yeah.
that both Full House, and Family Matters, they both had very similar theme songs. Not only in the way that they were composed, but even in the lyrics. Let's see, the lyrics for Full House, "Everywhere You Look." It was whatever happened to predictability. The milkman, the paper boy, the evening TV. How did I get to living here? Somebody tell me, please. This old world's confusing me. So there we go. Like, it's a very interesting
that
how
was
they both
the
came out
last
of sync.
gasp of the wholesome American sitcom or family sitcom till The Simpsons murdered them back when The Simpsons were edgy. It was almost like you could see that fatalism of like, oh, what happened? But no, it's interesting you mentioned. Professor, you must have done your research because I am a pretty hardcore Foucauldian, and so this connection. But,
is that a come on? No, go on. Sorry.
Well, I like to consider myself a right Foucauldian, a right hitting alien. But it is true. I feel like a lot of this discourse is based around or predicated on the disciplinary aspect of this internalized servitude towards one's own capacity for reason and one's own tools of reason. But also what comes up is what you were describing is essentially the image of thought, right? Like this is very much Deleuzian, right? Like in the size of control, the image of thought is something that is predicated on the assumptions you make about thinking itself, about the way you approach certain questions. And I feel that the rationalists or the neo-rats, whatever the fuck, I think with the exception of Negrestani, they really don't think about the ways in which thinking itself is conditioned by certain meta assumptions of thinking itself. And I know this sounds very like nerdy and I don't know, very like theory cell, but that's just, to me, it just opens up like, so much. I mean, Chaos and Hopeful Abandon, you two can talk about this, and hopefully you could talk about the experience in academia as well from the other perspective, right? So
I can say that with what you're saying, they do try. And one of the things that's difficult in talking about, like, the rats versus the post rats, is that, like, anything you might be tempted to say, like, oh, rats do this, whereas post rats do that, and, like, post rats, like, think about, like, like deep emotive processes, and like, regard things in terms of like, broad constructions of cognition and cybernetics and so on, and like, think about gods and demons and whatnot. Like, any of that, you can find rats who are doing it. Like, like, it's, there's a lot going on in the rat sphere, and a lot of that leads to them, like, basically, like, descending into shit posting mode, which is that's really how you become a post rat, is like you basically stop making, like, trying really hard posts on less wrong, and you just kind of, start, like, fucking around on Twitter. But, like, there's a lot of attempts to examine the preconditions of thought, the limitations of the tools that they're using to think, and language itself, and so on. It just, I don't know. It never seemed to go far enough to me, but, like, there's effort there. Oh yeah, I guess I wanted to stick up for him a little bit.
Well, what is their end
I think
game?
it's yeah.
Go on, Simon, then Gio.
Yes, thank you. Gio, I think that's a great question, right? What is the end game? And has anyone thought that? I mean, two thoughts. And one thing, I mean, is and this is whenever we study, and I need a good name for this. Actually, a colleague of mine, Chloe Perry, and I talked about counter-epistemic communities is a good term, right? So these are groups whose, like, you have a countercultural group, and this is like, okay, we're going to wear, dog collars, and, we're going to break certain norms of behavior. The counter-epistemic groups, like, we're going to break certain norms of reasoning, right? We're going to smash in one direction or another the prevailing mode. And so the rationalists do this. NRX does this really obviously. I mean, Yarvin is a kind of classic example. But so when we study these groups, 98% of them, I'm looking at my graphs on the pinned to my wall here, and it's like exactly as KL says, right? It's a self-similar graph. What that means is you get these kind of mega creatures who are dominating the space, like Bukowski, Red Pill is one of the groups we study. But the other thing it means is, like, 99% of these people show up, they're like that weird, thing that Avi Loeb's obsessed by, right? Like they just pass through this space for, a day, a week, a month, and then they're gone, right? So, when we think about these groups, we also said, I mean, one of the kind of crucial things is, what does it do to somebody who's there for like 10 minutes, right? Most people are tourists, right? And in fact, the overwhelming majority of tourists. So that's a kind of piece of the puzzle there. The other thing I just love about this remark that you make, us is, this is people with an image of thinking, right? And that, I mean, this goes all the way back to Hegel, right? Trying to talk about the object of thought itself. What you get immediately is, of course, this kind of stacked infinitude of, let's represent representation to ourselves and represent the representation of representation to ourselves, and so on. So there's something odd about
all the way back to the master and slave. Yeah.
Well, exactly right. What is the where's the asymptote? What's funny is if you look at some of the stuff that and again, Bukowski, just to take him as a sort of character, when you go back and look at him, there's none of that reflexive thought. At least at the beginning, and it's mostly what it reminds me the most of is like Scientific American, right? It's like science. This is great. Like, I'm going to blow your mind with this, one weird trick. So, Gio, but please go on. I mean, many.
Then from there, shading kind of into like Reddit atheist sort of territory.
Yeah.
Well, there's some great stuff written about that. I won't plagiarize it, but Gio, yeah. Sorry.
No, that's great. That because being someone who also has spent a lot of time studying, being a part of as well, various like internet, like dissident internet ecologies, it's there's this weird sort of convergence with like schizoculture on the internet and breaking down, and how sort of I had this article once. It was on the original what was it called, Autistic Mercury website, and it was I called it shark wombing, where people that try to achieve mainstream clout, they'll like sort of they'll be within an internet ecology. I think I called it the I had like some weird long drawn out name for it that was like really pretentious and stupid. What was it called? Digital Savageries. How sort of an online model of hostile ecologies, where on the internet, where it's like people, you know how like tiger sharks are born, right? They basically fight each other in the open womb. It's like this water. It's like a sac filled womb filled with embryonic fluid, and they have to like fight each other to get out, and whoever swims out, that's the one that gets born, right? So I said that this is sort of a model. I know it's totally death metal, like it's like listening to 90s Cannibal Corpse. So I said that is similar to like a lot of these online spaces, where in the pursuit of achieving some sort of like mainstream success or grift, you have a lot of like interactions between people that is essentially boiled down to, I'm going to stab as many backs as I can, so then I will achieve like transcendence. And of course I was talking about people on YouTube and so forth. So what happens is there's a lot of repeatability between a lot of these internet based interactions between like largely marginalized, very underground sort of groups. And I feel that to me, it's like it's a really crazy sort of observation of what happens when people are totally uninhibited by anonymity and other forces. Mm-hmm. And given sort of the older attitude of the internet being like, this isn't a place where serious things happen, right? This is a place where people can sort of let their like libidinal economy just like totally enter like a deregulated bear market. So now it's like, what happens when you take a bunch of people who are neuroatypical together and put them in the same space, and then they create these sort of these hierarchies predicated upon clout, posting, internet drama, so forth, and that becomes the fuel, I said, for a lot of these interactions. But then that's the question of like, is it just that in the information society, is this a unique occurrence, or is this always been, but now we have like this accelerated version of like this weird like, you know, taboo mores of social interaction between people, like a lot of the business, like having spent some time in academia, not like I got to the master's level, put it that way, but like it seems like the weird Byzantine regulations of behavior and thinking, it's almost like, not that I'm sympathetic to that, but it's almost like maybe yeah, there's a point to it. It's like
maybe it's a use.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like the prison YouTuber Wes Watson. He's like, you know, people talk about politics in the federal pen. If there wasn't politics, people would get stabbed left and right. Politics being like the clicks in the cars and so forth. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to go with that. It's an acceleration of a pattern that's always existed, and you know, probably largely what you would find going back is that what's happening in, you know, these little pool subcultures was happening before in secret societies. I posted in the Zoom chat my tweet from 2018 on this topic, which was subcultures are for growing monsters in, ideally monsters so strong they can punch holes in the superculture.
Oh, that's
wow.
True.
Well,
that's real Samizdat right there, you know.
It's pretty interesting that you're pointing this out, as I was going to read this from Lovers of Sophia by Jason Rees Giorgiani. I don't know, Simon, are you familiar with Giorgiani's work?
No, I'm afraid not.
He's a very interesting guy. Like, it's hard for me to say where exactly I would categorize him in. I mean, I know he has kind of a seedy reputation as far as certain people like Richard Spencer that he was associated with back in the past. But as far as certain things that he ended up, writing down, you could say it's like super high-level shizo posting in a way, like when he talks about ancient civilizations and space aliens and all this kind of stuff. But it goes together in a very interesting way. So over here, he wrote about so what Nietzsche, qua apocalyptic prophet, is seeing through a glass darkly here, and what was adopted as a plan of action by Skorzeny and his comrades is something that I would conceptualize as a baudende Aufbruch ins Weltanschauungskrieg.
Weltanschauung.
Thank you. Heidegger was right that some things can only be thought in German. Abau is the term deconstruction from Heidegger's thought, so that abauende literally means unbuilding or dismantling, but through its connection with the destruction of the history of ontology, that was the projected aim of being in time, and in light of the socio-politically dangerous implications of such dynamiting of the paradigmatic principles of a world epoch, I suggest that rendering abaudene as destructive, which carries within it the sense of destructuring. The idea of Abbruch has a rich philosophical and literary history in modernist German thought. It is alternatively translated as breakup in the sense of a breaking with or divorce, or breakthrough in the sense of a revolutionary discovery rather than an incremental increase in knowledge, and finally as a breakaway in the sense that such discoveries can represent a rupture wherein something or someone heads out of bounds in a different direction. In other words, a breakout or departure. Thus, my concept for what Skorzeny, Kamler, Gechlin, Bormann, and company did, indeed, even if it remained imprecisely conceptualized, could be loosely translated as destructive departure in worldview warfare. Although based on the alternative meaning of the terms, it is also possible to translate it as deconstructive breakthrough in psychological warfare, or dismantling breakaway in the worldwide ideological war. This is the worldwide constitutive or emergent state of a breakaway civilization. It is based both on a breakthrough in the positive sense and on a negative breaking down and breaking away. This allows those who have broken through to come back and conquer what they have broken down in a way that is, here comes this word, Kriegsentscheidend, for the Weltanschauungskrieg. Recall that this term,
Worldview war?
worldview warfare. So this term Kriegsentscheidend, or war decisive, was a classification at the highest level, above top secret, uniquely given to Project Kronos. Okay, and I'm not going to get into Project Kronos right now with the bell and all that. For those who know,
I'm pretty sure Land wrote about the same thing there, but characterizing it as outbreak in the sense of a rash.
Interesting, but like,
Yeah,
what
or some
exactly?
gangrenous infection.
What exactly can we make of this? Because long story short, Giorgiani believes that the Nazis are still around, that they're living in Antarctica, somewhere like in the basis, or maybe like in the inner Earth, and that they've taken control of a lot of our institutions, planning a breakaway civilization right now, and how like all of us are kind of left behind on the prison planet. So in a way, they want to destroy civilization so that we don't get to the point where we're able to harness energy, because we're a bunch of stupid motherfuckers that wouldn't know what to do with that power.
I should point out that Giorgiani is a Promethean cosmopolitan who broke away from the alternative right when he saw that they had very like regressive thinking, and so he essentially wants to embrace like a positive vision of like posthuman transcendence that is like not of the like either of like the Ray Kurzweil variety or like the Landian horrorist type of stuff. So I don't know, make of that what you will, but I guess we are kind of like in an information war. Like, for example, I was reading this, shout out to my boy Lomez. He wrote this brilliant article today for IM 1776. It's called Generational War. Yeah. And it's all about this sort of war over the distribution of information. And I wonder if this sort of this arising of a lot of these like alternative underground spaces on the internet, I wonder if that's probably, and who knows if I'm just making too much of it, right? But if that's like a result of sort of a fundamental breakdown, what people have called the semiotic collapse. You know, Justin Murphy always talks about the semiotic collapse. Now, great.
What's the first word there that you said?
The semantic apocalypse, according to Baker.
Sorry, semantic politics. Yeah. Semantic apocalypse. Yes. So I wonder if we should just ride the tiger on this, or if there is like something seriously wrong going on, like with this whole.
Well, the last thing that Giorgiani said was basically
There's such
like,
a thing as wrong.
Well, again, according to Jashani, once again, like, he thinks that if human beings don't figure out a way to get our shit together, then we kind of deserve whatever it is that's going to happen to us, as far as, you know, his theory of the breakaway civilization reducing
so everything's
civilization. Well, I guess, yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, will we be able to get our shit together in time? I mean, maybe small circles of us
Isn't it
will.
exciting to find out?
It would be. I mean, this is kind of what I'm doing here with BTR, where I want to get circles of people together to rise those circles up at least. I don't know about the rest of humanity, but I'm just talking about if people in small circles can get their shit together, then that's already, I think, good, even from the perspective of reincarnation, right? If
Yeah,
reincarnation
support that.
exists, then people who are able to get certain knowledge and exchange ideas with each other now, they will be able to, in a certain way, pass it on to whatever form they're going to acquire in their next life, assuming reincarnation exists. So it's not a total loss if we look at it that way. I don't know. I also want to hear from Ostaf. Ostaf, you've been awfully quiet, and I want to make sure that you can get a word in edgewise here as well. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, sorry. I just didn't want to bring down the level of conversation going on right now. I mean,
Oh, not at all. No, that's my job.
okay, right. Yeah, I mean, well, maybe you could say that if we assign a certain probability to reincarnation being true, then there's a certain utility and information being passed on through that way, and so there might be some marginal gain that way, right? If you want to go back into rationalism again.
They'll have a formula for calculating with each reincarnation cycle. Like, they'll have a probability of how closer you are to Moksha. That would be like one of the...
Absolutely. It'll be something like Drake's equation, where it's just 7 unknowns all multiplied together. So I've never been to California. Actually, I'm kind of on the outside of that whole circle, but just as a graduate student studying in like computer science and stuff is kind of how I've brought my mind over to this kind of patterns of thinking, and like looking at society as a bunch of systems and interacting algorithms and optimization problems and stuff. But at the same time, that really clashes with my personal experience of the world. And just like on a personal level, you know, I feel emotions and I have dreams, and I'm not a rational being, and I don't try to analyze myself through that lens. Like I'm not a big fan of like the evo-psych kind of, you know, finding biological impulses behind every higher brain pattern that goes on. I feel like there's a lot of things that get missed by that kind of a framing. And this is all a bunch of, you know, this is obviously like something that's going to vary a lot from person to person. It's really hard to, I think, build like a convincing objective case about this kind of thing. But that's kind of the thing that's mostly kept me away from like pure rationalist, trying to treat every kind of social problem or, you know, any kind of situation involving human beings as something that you can analyze and optimize and, you know, turn into a sequence of quantified variables, functions, and things like that.
I'm just
the high
struck by this.
modernist worldview of rationalism doesn't work for you.
Okay, wait, what? Sorry.
Wait,
The-
okay,
the
so
high-
Fine, go on, yeah.
The high modernist utopian worldview of rationalism doesn't work for you here.
Yeah, actually, if we want to like drag in the other post word here, right? I think you can probably make a connection between post-rationalism and postmodernism, in that they're kind of a similar disillusionment with the, like the rationalist modernist kind of intellectual utopia project that came before them.
Yep. Post-rats love seeing like a state. This is one of the, you know, the known things about them.
I also love Seeing Like a State. I think that book has
It's a great fucking book.
Well, it's
Wait,
united
what's the
so
book
many
called?
people from Hayekians to Foucaultians.
wait, what's the book called?
Seeing like a state.
Seeing Like a State by
Seeing Like a
James,
State.
James C. Scott.
Are you a fan of that book, Simon? And I know you were going to say something earlier as well.
Yeah, no, I am. Scott came when I was faculty at Indiana. Scott came and gave the series of like whatever was fancy lectures. It was wonderful. one of my colleagues said it reminded her of Rousseau's Second Discourse, right? It was, let's go way back to something wonderful that existed before we started, planning our states. And so that would be the kind of reductio for Scott. But no, I'm just struck by this response, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch our interlocutor's name. Who's our new guy on the feature?
So
Sorry.
this is Ostov.
Ostov, yes.
And I'm gonna say it in Russian, Nadezhdy, which means hope.
All right.
Or rather, hopes, the plural hopes. For some reason, I'm not sure why, but there we go.
Also, so it's, what I think about, what you led me to think about in this case was, every religion, at least in the whatever post-axial age, has a prohibition against idol worship, right? This, the creation of one's best image of God and the replacement of God by that image, and that is, maybe the thing that brings together a whole bunch of these, let's call them attractors, right? These sort of places where one never escapes. I think zero's gone, right? I'll just show you. Here's our map. This is our map of the ideological network of the red pill. At least is how we're working on it. Machine learning is coming, but one of the things we notice, right, is a classic example. This is the incels, right? The incels are rationalists, except instead of Bayesian reasoning, it's like this kind of bullshit pseudo Evo psychology. And so, they find themselves, or they convince themselves that they're structurally incapable of reproduction or survival or love or whatever it is. And so at that point, what do, right? Jump off a bridge. You shoot up a shopping mall. There's a spectrum there, right? You also just
I'll
disappear.
push a
Right?
little bit back on that.
Go, Gio, please. Yeah.
As an incel myself,
The playtime is vol cell, Gio, but yes.
Yes, exactly. I'm only kidding, but maybe, unless. No, I think this comes up a lot. Even today, actually, I was tweeting with a Lo-Fi Republican, and if you shout out to my boy Lo-Fi Republican, if you go on any of his incel tweets, it's like this sea of DSA people that are like quote tweeting it and saying that, I can't believe this. I think I have what I would push back on is the real desire is not the true desire. I think that the problem with the incel thing is that it got too involved with like the PUA manosphere stuff, which is largely what some would call a bastardization of Evo Psych, right? So it's a lot of like, why is SMV, why are the 80-20 rule, which I mean is by and large kind of it's kind of true, right? If you look at the I think Tinder, they got rid of the statistics.
Yeah. Well, we can battle that one out to you. But sorry, go on.
But
yeah.
What I would say is that the mischaracterization of the incel is about a brute commodification of desire itself. That is what I said today, actually, with Lo-Fi Republican. I said the problem is that the framing of it as like, okay, the incel cannot reproduce and it's purely about sexuality and so forth. The problem is that they're trying to express a longing of being left out in more intangible reality of love and affection and care, even like in the Heideggerian sense of care, of being socially involved. So the problem is that, this sort of, what would you say, let's go down like all of like what us on the right wing we call, atomization, modernity, so forth, whatever buzzword you want to say.
Modernity.
Yeah. So the problem is like the capacity for like rootless atomized modernity to commodify those intangible feelings outside of some like dystopian horrific of like, equilibrium drugs and you're going to like basically GP3 and GANs yourself and CRISPR yourself the perfect trad waifu or something like that. I mean, apart from some kind of like sci-fi dystopian scenario, there is in some sense no accurate measure of what the incel is lacking, or rather the capacity for society to so I think,
but let me jump in here. I think this is
okay. Go ahead. Do not show Lucas's room. Oh no!
Wow, that is the Hegelian Lucas's room. It's the Lucas's room that indeed reflects upon itself.
It's fractaling too.
It is the Lucas's room of this is like a 0 HP. So Gio, I think it's really useful to separate two things, right? One is the psychoanalysis of somebody who ends up in these groups, and the other is the genealogy of the group, right?
Yes.
And I think this is very true. And so I want to really separate these out because there's many reasons that people will join an ideology or sign on to an ideology in this era of, let's say, quasi-voluntary ideologies. And so we can talk about the sociological emergence of this thing one could subscribe to, but then also, and I think you're talking about this deeper point, which is the psychoanalytic problem. My point of view, and I'll just lay this across the table here, right, is that these are incredibly damaging movements for people to get sucked into.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm sure it's fine, right? No one's getting cancer, right? So these are incredibly damaging movements. They ruin people's lives. They strike between 17 and 21, as far as we can tell. But we can tell a very elaborate story. We have, timestamp to the second, the last, 8, 9, 10 years. And then we went back all the way to Usenet in the 90s where this began. So, sociologically, enormous information here. But everybody wants to know, like, how do you get someone out? And not because we need to make them good servants of the capitalist state, but just because this is clearly fucking with someone's self-flourishing.
But that's
such a harder question. It's a deeper, harder question, right?
But that's the thing, though, and I've tweeted about this. I've wrote 2-part articles about this. You can find it on my blog, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
About how the incel is the production of power knowledge itself. The incel is almost like becoming, in a sense, the docile body, the one that has to be surveilled and regulated, right? So, but when you say that, when you go to people that are ostensibly like, I mean, the new left, what is the new left anymore? But let's say like academic, like Varso type of like the new left, right? If you go and you say to them, well, the incel, exactly the sort of policing of sexuality that Foucault was talking about. It's, oh no, oh my God, that's terrible. Why would you say that? That's like a total schizo, like that's a dangerous, evil right-wing assertion, right? To say to like hijack Foucauldian, like the power knowledge period and say, well, the incel is exactly the production of this sort of like discourse around the regulation and the normativization of sexual. Sorry, I'm just getting. I mean, it's not my. This is about you guys, so I talk too much.
Gio,
no.
Can you tell us, Gio, is the incel the last man? Is that the case?
Yes, the incel.
Well, the Gooner is the last man.
The Gooner is the last man. The Gooner is the last man.
All right.
But I would say the incel is a byproduct of the last.
Wait, Simon shaking head. Do you know what a Gooner is?
No. Is it related to a Goomba? Super Mario?
It's kind of like that question, who is Chris Chan? It's like, what is a Gooner? I'm Break the Rules. It's like the question. Lev, please educate Professor, the good professor.
So we're actually developing a bingo game. We're developing a bingo game, and I think Gooner will probably be the free pass. I mean,
what is a Gooner?
Free space. Yes.
That is the free space.
So Gooners are people who have multiple monitors, either in the virtual reality space or in real life space, splayed out with porn on all the monitors. They're watching the porn, they are pleasuring themselves to the porn with the goal of not coming or prolonging the experience of orgasm in order to stay within this gooned out state. Where they become one with their penis, so to speak, and completely forget about any other thing that's going on in the world.
And they say that it brings them a heightened state of awareness after a few hours, where literally the slightest touch will bring them to a monumental orgasm.
Guys, I didn't used to believe in trigger warnings.
Yeah, what is it? True. But they
I'm in. I'm 100% in. I'm 100% in. This is my Ovid's Metamorphoses.
And there's a whole community. There's a whole community around them too on Reddit and so forth and Discord. They have Discord calls. 50 people deep where they're all gooning together, so you hear this like blur of
this brave new world that has such people in it.
Wow. All right.
Some of them have VR rigs where they have like a like that the end scene of the Truman Show where it's all those monitors. It's like,
Well, Simon, if you can hook us up with one of those, not cattle prods, but like one of those things with the hook on the side, so we can capture one of the Gooners and bring them to Carnegie Mellon University.
the dog
for study.
Gosh,
We're doing this. We're doing this for science. Do we want to maybe like throw a bone to any of the people asking questions in the chat? Maybe answer
absolutely,
one?
yes,
of course.
I mean,
fun.
I have not seen any super chats as of yet. So guys, step it on the super chats. But despite that, we are going to answer the questions that are already there. But anyway, let's go through some of the questions. So which ones do you see, Gio? I know that there was an earlier one from Zero HP about Bronze Age. Zero HP is not here right now, but I want to make sure that that is answered.
This was about Chaos Prime's thread.
That's where I live tweeted my read through of Bronze Age Mindset.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I remember that thread. Yeah, that was good. Should maybe
it was quite
get
a
into that a little bit.
Yeah,
what's the question?
I'm trying to see. He asked. Okay.
Everybody subscribe while Geo's.
Until you've read Moldbug prove Obama birtherism using Bayesian rules, you have not grappled with the true Bay Area rationalism. I don't see it, Lev, but I think ZHP was just asking for a summation of he says bad things happen with falsifiable information, starts getting used to this.
Oh, here, I found it. Question
good,
for
good.
Chaos. I enjoy your thread on Bronze Age mindset. How does that figure into the cognitive arms race?
Yeah, and if you could link it, Chaos, if you could link it into the chat, then Lev will link it into the comment into the BTR chat. So yeah.
Give me a second and I'll pull that up.
Buff stolen valor femoids. Are fem cells real? No, stolen valor.
And guys, if you had any questions,
I've been told on good authority that fem cells are in fact real, but that's just more life decisions that never.
Fem cells have a community that is just as strong a cognitive attractor and just as toxic as incels.
That's right. But what do you?
They call us moids.
Yes,
as retaliation for femoids.
But what do you think? But I guess this is for all of us here. What do you think of the original impetus of a lot of these internet communities being largely driven by anonymity, and now that sort of wants to, well, rather the people, the powers that be, they want to sort of like disappear this with TikTok. I read this article from the Walrus. I mentioned this before, where they talk about how Zoomers are using TikTok, and we're going to get rid of like the evil, terrible, dark, the dark reality of anonymity on the internet, because people are just going to see each other's faces all the time and their real names. But I wonder though, is the mutually enforced sort of consensus thinking around these communities, is that more enforced by anonymity, or is it easier for sort of like, for example, in 4chan, you go to any like thread where it's like the typical, like, I don't know, Paul or R9K way of thinking, like, oh, these evil women, evil, which ethnic group, I don't have to say it. But
speaking of evil women, we have Alex Plotnick in the chat over here. Shout out to Alex.
Oh, nice. Shout out, friend of the show.
She's not an evil woman. She's great.
Yeah.
God love her.
Yes, but she is actually a very phenomenal artist as well.
Yes.
So, but I wonder, there are people that disrupt these threads that say that you people are a bunch of like angry, bitter incels that live in your basement and so forth. So I wonder if the sort of the disruption of a lot of these communities is almost more interesting, like the discursive disruption of these communities and the narratives that they set for themselves. I wonder if that's even like a thing, if that's strengthened by anonymity, or if we're going to have to like go back to, I don't know, where like some dystopian nightmare where like we're all doxxed and everyone knows, even to access the internet, you have to like have your IP address attached to your real name and face and so forth. So I wonder if like, sorry, I'm just riffing.
I mean, I think in the anonymous communities, we saw that, where disruption is a routine occurrence, then the community learns to cope with it. It doesn't say like, oh, we need to, have everybody be a name friend so that, we can, get rid of those bad disruptors, and learns to work around disruption, which, is probably a useful skill.
Well,
And there's a flip side here. I was going to say, jump in, right? It's so we have running God for, help us, right? We're running something on 4chan as well. You compare 4chan to Reddit, the ideological network on 4chan is just sort of non-existent, right? As far as we can tell, there's not a lot of, let's say, creative assembly, whatever, creative destruction. It's, we were sort of talking about, it's like a kind of bacterial culture. Ralph, who knows who these people are, right? It could be, one giant, one guy, right?
Well, when you're looking at 4chan, by the way, are you looking at all of 4chan or just Poll?
We are looking at Poll.
Oh, listen, Poll is all of 4chan now. I hate to say
Here we are, right? Here we are. It's but if you look at you look at the Reddit sites, I mean, this is a crucial thing. There's a difference between anonymity and pseudonymity, right? Which you guys all know. Right. This came up earlier, right? The role of hierarchy of status seeking. You can't seek status if there's no tie to an identity or persistent identity. So there's some limitation that we have on pure anonymity. Then you have the pseudonymity thing, right? But you have these, multiple identities, throwaway accounts. There's this extreme you have of, real person, whatever, like social security number, agent, sort of subject to the state. And you wonder, what's the spectrum, right? We may at some point have a kind of Bitcoin or Urbit-like identity, which is pseudonymous, but persistent, hard to reject. It's a good question. What happens to the development of, let's call them these cognitive traps to go back, or cognitive arms or landmines to go back to Chaos's to opening.
Rachel Haywire always makes fun of me for using the phrase cognitive attractors, or kind of cognitive attractor basins. But that's, I see a lot of things that way, as like, the incel community is a huge cognitive attractor base and has a tremendous gravity well. People get sucked into it, and it like something that might have been essentially a phase becomes part of identity, becomes a crab bucket exercise.
That's a good one, yeah. So. But I wonder, though, again, we have to always examine the normative assumptions of like why. For example, I mean, the biggest one, the one that really sticks into my craw, is the discourse around the radicalization narrative and how it only goes one way. When really, if you look at the radicalization model, it really is, it has the potential to be an objective model, regardless of political ideology. But the fact that it's deployed against like this ghost of the alternative right, that is, it's really for ideological purposes within itself. But when you look at it objectively, it is true. There is sort of a number of cognitive booby traps that happen where people get into this way of thinking. And it's very rigorously self-regulating too, because, for example, in 4chan, and this, Professor, from your research, I mean, if you stray from the narrative a bit, then it's like you're a Fed, you're a Jew, it's a self-reinforcing sort of narrative of, I don't want to say narrative of paranoia, because I think that's a way to discredit conspiracy theory as such as a valid alternative ontology.
It's not really paranoia, is it? It's regulation. It's again, like, it's defining the boundaries of what's an acceptable identity in the space.
Yes.
I mean, it reminds me a little bit of, I'm just thinking about, like, this is years ago, right? Walking through Washington Square Park, right? And people are constantly offering you drugs. This is like ages ago, right, before Bitcoin. One of the things you see on 4chan, right, is that there are so many people trying to sell this stuff. So we almost see it's a surplus of sellers, meaning people trying to sell whatever bizarro theory they have, and the Jews always get it, right? So whatever bizarre anti-Semitic theory, anti whatever theory, that these far outnumber the buyers, right? So there's far more. It's almost like this is a group entirely consisting of, like, who are they even speaking to? I suppose is the right question. It reminds me a little bit of contemporary poetry. there are more people writing poetry literally than reading it.
Yes.
There may be more people writing, screen
people in
text.
MFA programs than there are people buying the.
This is like, I mean, like the worst thing you could say about 4chan, it's like it's kind of like an MFA program, right? Maybe that's the way this finally dies, right? Is that it's wow, this is
4chan is over now. So.
That's it.
Oh man.
So I mean, that's the one thing we miss, right? Is we think of it as this one guy dealing, or a couple people dealing it. We actually, there's a competition to be dealers, because of course with dealership comes power.
And we have it in this
I think
scenario in like we have all these people bouncing around essentially looking for meaning, looking for purpose, and trying out one thing, it doesn't work, trying out the next thing. Like one of the strongest moves you can make in that milieu is to make whatever your thing is difficult to escape. You make it so that like in order to enter, you have a barrier to exit. I think we're going to see more and more of that coming along because it's evolutionarily advantaged in the situation.
Well, that's one of the memes on 4chan as well, where Mr. Burns points to the sign that says, "Don't forget, you're here forever."
Yes.
But Hopeful Abandon, you had something to say.
Yeah, I think well, in a lot of like real name communities, right, you get ideas that are generated by intellectual authorities. And so like you might have academia informs a lot of ideas on how society works, and that kind of percolates down. And in an anonymous forum, you don't really have the weight of your reputation to back that up, but you do still have these memes trying to spread through people's brains and become dominant in that space. And so I think a lot of people discovered that really the only thing you need is to have a good understanding of what's, viral mimetically.
Right.
And so you get anyone feels like they can push the next meme and they can make it take off.
And this
you
is
get
where
things like
comes from. Yeah.
Which is why 4chan
they are right.
So effective for fermenting memes, for brewing things up that are going to go out into the world and wreak havoc.
But if those memes
sometimes
were
it's as
completely
simple
empty,
as
if they were completely empty, then people wouldn't, it wouldn't register. So there is still a dissatisfaction that people feel that makes them spread. I mean, the idea of a forced meme. A forced meme is not going to last.
Corporations are trying to create forced memes now. But
there's
Hopeful,
no
go on.
difference between there's no real difference, I think,
sorry.
between a forced meme and an unforced one. I mean, a classic meme is, something like Sakura eating a fish every day. And it's literally just a guy who posted the same picture every single day. And now that's like an iconic image that's burned into everyone's brains. And it doesn't matter if it was forced or not, it still ended up becoming colonizing people's minds in that same way. And so there's all kinds of...
A forced meme is a marketing campaign. A meme that, it goes beyond the force level is a marketing campaign that people talk about around the water cooler.
I think forced and unforced is like ascribing intention to the progenitor of the meme, but I don't think that it makes much of a difference ultimately once the meme escapes beyond that context.
Interesting.
And there's all kinds of people running ops on 4chan now. I mean, Simon DiDio, you're basically running an op. For all that's worth, when you're doing your studies. I don't want to call you a.
We do no intervention.
No.
We would need many ethics approvals to intervene in any of these systems.
Yes, it's coming of age in 4chan. Oh God.
Well, observation is intervention. You're changing the result by measuring it. But there's definitely
you're just helping the bureaucracy of ethics approval here by making these.
There's
arguments.
already all kinds of federal,
but the narrative,
officers.
You have to you have to ethically surveil the incels, the wild pygmy incels on the internet. This
is something. I think this is sort of a serious question. We thought about this a lot. Like, what does it mean to treat people with respect? Regardless, that's sort of the fun thing, right? You're going to study Nazis. The university ethics says you've got to treat them with equal respect. There's nothing you can do here,
right?
And we think about this a lot. Like, what does it mean to reflect back a community onto itself? There's huge vested interest on every side, right? There's a lot of correct conclusions one can come to. So we're under, pressure
And
from
even the
that.
framing
And-
itself, like being a documentarian, like the way like
Mhm.
Louis Theroux, for instance, like he edges towards like a critique, but at the end of the day, it's still like, look at the freaks. Like it's like a more sophisticated.
We don't want to do that. You don't want to do
Yeah,
that. Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
like
that's-
our goal is universal or universalizable, let's say, knowledge, general principles.
Mhm.
And ideally, at some point we have a synoptic study
Yes,
of this.
yeah. And a debriefing. And...
It just so happens, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's partly because many of the left-wing groups have much sort of tighter connections to the wider
Yes.
world, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're a lefty edgelord, you have,
you get
can
sponsored
end
by
up
Google.
in, Dissent magazine.
Well,
I don't want to go that far, right? But yeah, I mean, it's
Well, there
Or
was
you
the,
have
young,
a-
the Young
you
Turks,
have a
for
podcast
example.
that makes $80,000 a month, and your father
Yeah.
used to be the editor of the Wall Street Journal. So I wonder who I'm subtweeting. The
Yeah. No, I mean-
Chapo Trap House. No,
I mean, look,
I'm-
like the young Turks, in that
yeah,
in
or
that,
the
in that
Young
episode,
Turks. That would be another.
in that episode where Alex Jones invaded their studio and got into Senghugur's face. But the Young Turks, they had a podcast that was, there was the Google sign right above in that studio. And again, this is like an organization of people associated with the Turkish government, and Hassan Piker, even more left-leaning, being the nephew of
but
Senk.
Lev, we are being uncharitable because the Young Turks did generally, like, they were a DIY, like, alternative news source for the time being at least the 2010s. But yeah, sorry, we cut you off, Professor.
It's a, gosh, I mean, there's so many pieces here, right? One is, we think about this a lot. In fact, the first place I studied was Wikipedia. And, people are very badly behaved on Wikipedia and very well behaved. And so we had to figure out, okay, how do you talk about bad behavior without essentially doxing somebody or, at least drawing attention to somebody? And so these are really interesting questions, right? We see ourselves in some ways like anthropologists. You try to understand, but then the one thing you don't want to do is go native. So there's a lot of temptation to sympathize with people because you just see, you feel, like I hate to say, you feel sorry for them. They're often much younger. You see that, and it's another one of these dangers, right? So I don't know how to put those pieces together. It's just, I mean, you bring up this hot button issue of the ethics of it, the ethics of studying people. What does it mean to study people who've lost their minds? Maybe that's the right way to say it. Historically, like Foucault got lucky, right? He could study people who lost their minds 100 years ago. But if we want to ask questions today about people at least temporarily losing their minds, this is a normative question to me.
Well, there are all kinds of gradients here in terms of a mind either being lost or a mind being on the verge of being lost when people are surrounded by things like on 4chan. People always use the term clown world. I think that's become popular at around, like, when was it, Geo? Like 2019? Is that around
I believe, it came, okay, clown world came originally from probably I'm not going to say Salo forums. I'm probably going to say my posting career. That's like MPC forums was the original place of clown world. Then it was taken up by, I remember this because I was a part of Thermidor magazine at the time where it became popular, along with the term Bugman, which was also created by both Salo and MPC forums. So at the time, the clown world thing was, I would say, around 2017, 18, 19 was when it sort of crept up from like forum culture, like really like far right forum culture into I want to say in part when we were doing a Thermidor magazine, we talked about this. Social Matter had articles about it. And then later, now like mainstream people say, like, put the clown, like the Beeble art piece that sold for $9 million has the clown emoji in it against Donald Trump, and Donald Trump ostensibly was like a harbinger of the clown world meme itself as like a postmodern political artist, like the aestheticization of politics. But it's really crazy how, again, that was like a forum culture meme that percolated up to like now, like everyone knows. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask you. I mean, I'm going to say this, I don't mean this in a bad way. Who cares, right? So why do we actually care about that? It's our
history. It's our unique knowledge history. Like,
other than the art history aspect of it, I can offer another reason as to why people should
well, it
care.
is like
because
it's like when people say like, "Oh, this is a white supremacist," like Pepe the Frog is a white supremacist meme. So
no,
you shouldn't
but
use
it's not even just
like
that.
like I
It's
saw this moderator,
Yeah.
like he's a top moderator for Twitch, saying that like maybe people shouldn't use a Pepe emoji on Twitch, right? So,
well, here, I
ahead,
mean, it's
though,
kind of
sorry.
like what Pylos wrote right now in the chat. You're being
Mhm.
gaslit by priests in white robes to be happy with your condition. I mean, this kind of
Mm.
comes to why I say, like, some people have been Frank hassled out of their minds, and some are gradually in the way too. Because I really do think, like, the more of these conversations that we have here on BTR, the more I think it is important to get to the core of not so much clown world as in how it's represented in the art form like Gio was talking about, but more so what are the primary root causes, like the reasons why people even talk about a clown world to begin with. Because
Yeah.
the big separation I see and what BTR is also trying to undivide in its own way by bringing a lot of people from the mainstream together with people from more of the underground internet cultures is that people are concerned about things happening, within, or at least as they appear to be happening to them within the communities in terms of like, issues like migration, issues like, the nature of government control, all these, academia, all these various things people get really concerned about, and they bring up various articles that talk about, things that, gender reassignment of young kids, things of that nature. And they keep bringing that up and talk about now we're in this clown world and
Well, it's like a
nobody
black
cares.
pill.
Yeah.
It's like a way of almost like a weird. There are people who do it better than others. It's like a weird performance art of black pilling that I personally think, and this is my opinion, and I will die by this opinion. My thesis is that Nobody TM, the video artist, basically started a lot of this trend of like, even like the most mainstream example being like, I don't know, Paul Joseph Watson videos where it's like, this is modernity. It's a picture of like drag time story hour with like vaporwave music. That was just a bastardization of Nobody TM. But anyways, it's
but nobody in the mainstream even gives an inch to any of the problems that these people are bringing up. And to me, that's always been pretty sus.
Then the counter force being is that there are people who become like obsessive to the level of psychosis around like,
well, because nobody brings it up with them. They're in a circle and they're circling the wagons because there isn't somebody to go up to them and to talk with them and to actually break down a lot of these things that they're seeing problems with. I mean, this is, again, something that I think Break the Rules is doing in its own way, but that's another thing that I'm interested in. Like, Simon, would you be interested in examining not just 4chan, but also examining the PMCs, the professional managerial class people, the people who work at NPR, because that is another very interesting thing to look at, where they are so separated, like they're just like the polar opposite of whatever conversations are going on in this culture that talks about clown world. Nobody within that culture would even utter anything close to the sentiments of people who talk about clown world. And I find that to be very interesting. Like, do people, when they see certain things going on, do they just reject it? Do they choose not to think about it? Do they think, it's not a big deal? I mean, I know that people who are older than I am, who were, in the Soviet Union, who have experienced a lot of horrible things, they look at a lot of the things that are happening right now as more of a swinging of the pendulum to the other side, and then they say, okay, it's swinging this way, things are very woke right now, and later on it's going to go back to like a different direction, and then just going to keep going on like that. So maybe I think their perspective is right here, but not even that is talked about so much within this professional managerial class. Like, it's almost like it's not there. They choose to completely ignore any of it. And I guess my problem is that because they ignore and because they always end up putting the worst qualities into, like, imbuing the worst qualities in a lot of these 4chan people, they are going to start to mimic a lot of those worst qualities. Almost like, oh, you call me a Nazi, well, I'm going to, now I'm going to become one. It's like one of those unfortunate things end up happening over time through this, like, miscommunication or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I just don't know how exactly that could be treated, but, treated, that's such a medicalized term for this thing. But I would love to hear from you, Simon, and Chaos, and Ostaf as well about this particular phenomenon.
I mean, there's when you talk about this sort of ordinary discourse, or we used to call them, I think it was GII, general interest intermediaries, like Time magazine, right? That are sort of, they're Schelling points, right? They serve as something that everyone's reading, and we all know that everyone's reading them. We all know that everyone knows that everyone's reading them. It's, the Seinfeld of communication. And that was, that things worked like that for a very long time. It would be very interesting to study, like, let's take the New York Times, for example, as it fades away from being this Schelling point of agreement. We all know that that's the standard belief, how it fades away, and can we detect that? It's an absolutely legitimate question. It's a very interesting one. Why study the subcultures? I mean, two things. One is they're much larger. It's a very different kind of thing. The, NPR's, the hiring process at NPR, sure, it's wrapped up in, I don't know, like, the Harvard Crimson or something, right? But it's small. It's like 100 people at most, maybe 10, who are deciding what's happening. When you get these bottom-up systems like, subreddits, that's a totally different thing. You have 300,000 authors, 3 million posts. You only see one of them. So very different kind of production process. I mean, one thing you ask is, why don't people study the PMC more? I guess you're going to call it PMC. I just, not a sociologist. I think there's, maybe we can leave that one aside. Why it doesn't get studied more? Certainly, once it's over, it gets studied. So we have plenty of time to study neoliberalism now that NPR is to study.
By the time it ends, the sun will explode.
Right?
So don't worry about it.
Well, yeah. So I mean, there's some great critical work done on this. Looking at, and I just think of neoliberalism as a lovely book that's just come out about. It isn't that these don't come under scrutiny, but Lev, maybe I'm not speaking to your question as directly as I might. So, am I?
No, I think it is pretty close to what I have in mind. I'm just curious about when it comes to a lot of not even the people who work at the New York Times or NPR, so much as the listeners. Because, I was at a party a couple of years ago where, people had their NPR tote bags, and they were repeating very similar talking points to the ones that I have heard in other places. I mean, it is a very established thing. People listen to the same thing. They come to the same conclusion.
Well, it's become a status symbol. I think an intellectual status symbol as well. Like I read reading the New York Times, or no, what goes beyond that? Maybe like reading, I don't know, subscribing to, I guess the Wall Street Journal in certain places is like this, it's a form of intellectual signaling, I guess.
Well, for example, like maybe
it's like having a Substack around these parts.
Sure, but like on a different note, let's say there's like all these economists, and they talk about all of these various things having to do Wall Street Journal, yada yada yada, and then somebody shouts out the Federal Reserve is evil, down with the Fed, we should have had we should have had our money in gold, and this is like the ruin of the and everybody looks at them and it's like, you fucking psycho, get out of here, get away, we don't want to have anything to do with you, even though a lot of these points were things that were talked about by legitimate economists, like if we're talking about Ludwig von Mises back in the day, that's not some tinfoil hatter over here.
Well, actually, in economic circles, that is tinfoil.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing to me to look at. Like, why is it that certain systems like these, they exclude any of the criticism that, let's say, would be leveled out on sites like 4chan when it comes to certain cultural deterioration that they're seeing, and or if we're talking about the economic side of it, why is it that these particular branches of economics are the ones that are, the doors close in their face? Like, there seems to be a force kind of preventing these kind of conversations from happening, almost like they spoil the party. I don't know. At least that's the vibe I get.
Isn't it like, so you're trying to play a game of poker and somebody comes in and like, puts down their tarot deck and like you're just doing something else, dude. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but it's not what we're doing in this room.
We think about this. I remember this years ago now, I don't know, some review of one of Noam Chomsky's books, right? I mean, infinite number of books. And they were said, well, he really criticizes the New York Times, his manufactured consent, but of course, all of his factual accounts also come from the Times, right? Same with Yarvin, right? This sort of hardcore NRX stuff, right? On the one hand, this is a gigantic matrix that you're stuck in. He's going to rip you out. On the other hand, all of the facts that underlie this come from this place, right? So there's this kind of double problem here where, as a physicist, you would say all they can do is sort of linear perturbations away from consensus reality. So you have to accept 99% of what's in the New York Times before you can like red pill people on the last 1%. So there's something kind of deeply phony about that, obviously, that is happening. Chomsky maybe is, he's operating in a different era when the Times was.
I love how you just body Chomsky and right there.
Well, yeah, right. We see this in conspiracy theories, right? Like the problem with the conspiracy theories, you have to keep widening the conspiracy. And the real snap comes. Go on, Gio. Go on.
No, this reminds me of a very excellent point. Not to brag, but I don't know how you feel about him, but he is certainly a very good person, and I would even say a friend online. But I was on Jeffrey Miller's podcast, Outsider Theory, and we were talking about the proto-schizo poster Francis E. Deck Esquires. And at the very end, I was, going into, he brought up Tusk and I brought, of course, Deleuze and Foucault and so forth. And but at the very end, he asked me the question, if you listen to it, he's like, Gio, the thing is with like gang stalking people or other conspiracy communities is that they're using internet technology, but they're using it in their mental framework is of a much older model of, basically like, later half 20th century telecommunications, the cathode ray, the cell phone tower, so forth. But yet at the same time, they're expressing their theories about a totalizing conspiracy through the medium of the even vaster telecommunication, which is the internet. So why is it that they preclude the technology of like posting on blogs or on Reddit or r/gang stalking? Why is that not like another expression of the conspiracy? Which, I mean, if you actually studied it, it is because of like algorithm control and monitoring and so forth. So why is it that the sort of the schizo poster conspiracy theorists, why did they omit that level of technology? It's like, Moldbug saying, well, the cathedral institutions are corrupt and so forth, and they're Chomsky consensus building. Yet it's like, here is this book that's registered in the Library of Congress and I can access it. And so it's almost of the same thing. It's like you have to sort of omit certain inconvenient truths about the nature of even getting to a basis of quote unquote alternative fact to begin with. So I don't know. It is a really weird,
and it's like this Zarathustra fantasy, right? Where you can start thinking without anybody, right? That you can form an account of the world, an image of the world without relying on anybody. If the flip side is if your conspiracy theory is so vast, right, as it is, and perhaps the most compelling ones are cognitive reasons for that, right? If your conspiracy is so vast, you literally can't think with anybody else because everybody's in on it, right? So there's no shared reality for your words. It's almost like Beetle in the box. It's private language at that point. So go on. Sorry, Liv. No.
I mean, think of how different it would be, and I understand the reasons why they didn't do it. But just for a second, imagine the world where there would have been a news reporter that would have said, you know what, we don't know what exactly like these weird messages that John Podesta sent out were. There's like some weird pizza map thing going on here. I wish he could just explain what these things are, but at least let's have a baseline that these are unusual sayings, and let's just leave it at that. What I don't like is that when people jump the gun so much as to make conclusions without verifiable evidence, while at the same time, things like, I don't know, like Bohemian Grove, for instance.
You just want more cognitive freedom than is compatible with a stable society. I think that's what the Times would say. I think that's what the journalists would say. You want to think in an unfettered way, right? Publicly. And that just can't work, right? we actually can't have that kind of epistemological stance towards the world because things would actually collapse. I think this is something, my guess is journalists think about this a great deal. Not the science journalists, they're great, right? But people who, journalists who consider themselves important members of, the Hobbesian Leviathan. I think there's just got to be limits to cognitive freedom. People are getting, I think, more and more comfortable saying that, in part because the level of freedom of thinking has because of online behavior has just gone through the roof, right? So they're confronted increasingly with a kind of French Revolution level of democracy, except now it's a different form, right? It's a free thinking. So when you say, hey, why can't I think this? I want, let's do this. I think that's probably the response. There's no good argument not to do that from first principles epistemically. It's only normative, it's political.
And just to be clear, I'm not even
talking
talking
said that
about
Substack recently. There was this article about how it's going to destroy journalism and it's going to promote like bad thinking or whatnot. So,
Go on.
I mean, just to be clear here, I'm not talking about thinking about things to such an extent that, you're leveling out things where, like, how do I know this is true? Oh, because this 13th century guy wrote it down in the book. Well, how do you know that what he's saying is true? At a certain point, like, things just, they, what I'm talking about, Gio. Certain things, they just kind of like go into the ether where we don't know. We don't know whether this 13th century guy actually saw what he saw, or whether he just made it up, for scapegoating purposes, things like blood libel, things of that nature. So when we're talking about a lot of these things, like, for example, Bohemian Grove, what I wish at least is for there to be a certain baseline that professional, rational journalists could just agree on and say, okay, like, what are some of the pieces of evidence that are brought forth for certain things like this? Okay, so there was this guy, Alex Jones, he went to videotape this structure. Now, could we say this structure was somehow a prop that was made in the movie theater? No, because the trees or like the stage would match up to the image that you could find in Google Maps. So this would be like a physical structure that, as a professional journalist, I would be able to identify, like, yes, this exists here and this exists there. Step 2. There was that interview that he did with David Gergen, that Jones did with David Gergen, who was this CNN guy, former Clinton advisor, where Gergen himself said on camera that, well, you violated the code of yada, yada, yada by talking about this.
That was great, yeah.
Yeah, don't talk about skull and bones, right?
Yes, exactly. But here we already have like the guy himself admitting things. So as rational journalists, let's put out and say, as a baseline, we know that there's this thing and people meet.
Here's what you remind me of, and I say this to somebody who got halfway through Citizens. We did write a paper on the French Revolution, and what you sound like is one of these kind of middle of the road guys in the Revolution, kind of center left, and you're like, look, why don't we have let's split the difference, right? Why don't we have like a kind of parliamentary monarchy where rational journalists like, look, we don't want to slaughter the king. I mean, come on, right? Like, why doesn't this work the way high school civics says it's meant to work? Like, you're like that guy, right? So you're not this not this person who says, okay, the people can't handle the truth, so we're gonna kind of think for them. We're gonna do 90% of the thinking for them. You're like, well, can't the people who are there right now do it? What you have is, I mean, you have this left, right? Let's call it the cognitive left, the Robespierres of the room, and that would be Yarvin, ironically enough, someone like that. Just slaughter them all, right? So that, I mean, metaphorically, don't even just walk away from it. Maybe exit, and that's a key thing that we think is part of this NRX is exit. So stop trying to fix the system. And hopefully this is maybe a comedic version of it. No one actually, doesn't actually have to be something in real space that happens. It's just that these people exit as opposed to repair. So what you're talking about here a little bit is repair, but certainly many of these people online just don't want to go down that road.
But which side needs to be repaired, though? Just real quick.
Exit's like a spiritual practice to me, but
sure.
It's well, that's the beauty of it. Lev is like the middle of the road, like Diderot, and I'm like Joseph de Maistre. And but no.
Well, no, I don't necessarily. The reason why I'm saying this, Simon, it's not. it's not because my intention is to, somehow change the way that the universe functions so that people, I know they're not going to talk about that. What I want to do, though, is send this out as a message to certain maybe more rebellious-minded journalists to come on BTR who have a good reputation and to actually open-mindedly talk about this, not even for the purpose of changing anything within their system, but the opposite.
We had last week, and she's in the chat right now.
Andrea Seabrook.
Andrea Seabrook. That's like pretty. I mean, NPR. I recently discovered that she's actually mutuals with Barack Obama, so that's pretty high up. She was on C-SPAN. Oh my God! But sorry, we're tooting our
again,
horn
I don't want to.
We have to move on.
We need to toot our horn. Subscribe right now. Subscribe to BTR. But anyway, the point that I'm getting to here, guys, is that I don't want to change the way this part of the system works. What I want to do is just to have certain clarities exist, and surprisingly, maybe not for the sake of the journos, but for the sake of the people who actually complain about a lot of this stuff. Because again, coming from a generation that was under heavy-handed communism, with things going on in that environment that I don't think anybody here could even begin to imagine what it's like to live under that kind of regime, I think it is important to keep in mind that Bohemian Grove, all this stuff, like, maybe it's not as bad, meaning like there are these systems that are out there. Let's just be candid and honest about what exactly we know that goes on there, and let's just level it together with the other systems that exist right now.
Nothing interesting happens at Bohemian Grove. It's a lot of heavy drinking. People put on some shows. The women aren't allowed. It's a pretty dull thing. But what I'm just struck by, Lev, is this. When we do science, right, and we do this, obviously science doesn't happen on stage. It can't happen on stage in part because you have to be able to think anything, say anything. You have to. So you would either sound, literally nuts if you're, questioning the metaphysics, the ontology. You may sound like somebody, on some extreme of the horseshoe if you're talking about social behavior. So we have to think completely freely. Nothing can be off the table. We do that privately, I would say. But when you say, okay, hey, look, what if Bohemian Grove is actually, sending mind control rays? I'm teasing you, Lev, but let's bring that on the table. There's sort of two questions arise to me. One is, I think many of the journalists would say, you just can't do this publicly because it's dangerous for this or that reason. It's, there are vulnerable children in the room. People would also say, look, we have limited time. Right. So, we're going to focus our epistemic labor on whatever it is, digging up the next scandal, running some more FOIAs. There's something here about maybe, sorry to
Well, it's more about releasing pressure, if that makes any sense.
No, let him finish.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think, like, as an academic, extraordinarily lucky because I get to spend time privately with really intelligent people. And we talk a huge amount. Nothing's off the table. That's this great privilege. So really the question is, how do we reproduce this condition of freedom for the wider masses, right? Masses is the word, no one's ordinary. But how do you, no, not me, man, but how do you do that? Like, how do institutions grow for people so that they don't go off the rails? And then you say, right, so what are the functioning aspects of like a place like academia or like whatever, the Jesuits, or whoever's managed to create those spaces. So that I think is maybe what you're asking, is not how do we fix the New York Times, but how do we create spaces that are, enable cognitive flourishing for, people who didn't manage to, make it through the academic, let's say, as one of the places, academic system.
Well,
I would say, let me add one more thing.
Yes.
Bohemian Grove is like one of the places people do this, right? It really sucks to be a certain kind of person who gets invited to Bohemian Grove because your life actually is kind of odd and a bit dull. So you go, and actually it's a little bit, it's like, Oxford, but drinking and, no women.
Wait, you
right?
you went to Bohemian Grove?
No. But
actually, I'm looking at the book right now, Bohemian Grove, Cult to Conspiracy by Mike Hansen, and they got pictures where him and Alex Jones went into
when it's all the owl, the whole thing. But I think it's so, even it's sort of a joke, right? Like, or Davos, right? Life is really boring if you're trading all the time. So a lot of these places are kind of entertainment zones where people come together and have talks. So just as you guys, not you, but people develop conspiracies about Bohemian Grove, people develop conspiracies about subreddits, which from the inside, it sounds like you guys are participants. From the inside, you're like, really? No, right? That's not true. But you might say maybe conspiracy theories attached to these places of, let's call them cognitive freedom, but that cognitive freedom requires privacy. So there's something compelling for those stories. But I keep interrupting you, so please.
But this is very close to what we're talking about here, as far as how do
maybe
we
chaos
get rid of
crime
a lot
and
of...
then hopeful abandonment.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. But just real quick.
About information.
Yes. Real
Arming
quick, though,
people with a Bakara market of arsenals of ideas. So.
Just real quick, though, I just wanted to quickly say that the reason why I even bring this up to begin with is because I think there's a lot of pressure being built up, and things like QAnon result from these questions not actually being addressed in, I wouldn't say shout it to the whole world, but at least have certain things that end up building in society to at least acknowledge, like, yeah, some rich people meet up and they gather and look at this funny owl, and yeah, there's some occult
Whatever
stuff here. Yeah, let's learn about, on CNN, let's learn about sacred geometry. You know, let's actually have some people, experts in symbolism,
on
come
CNN?
in and talk about this stuff. Yeah, no.
But this is part of the appeal of Jordan Peterson, right? Peterson was somebody who, and I think his most compelling stuff was this sort of early quasi-Jungian period, where you know, he's doing this kind of esoteric talking and somehow made it mainstream, and he's like talking to Eric Trump on YouTube. So there is a demand for that. I absolutely love. Yeah.
And I think they see a lot of resentment from the people who are in the inner circle or whatever, where they thumb their nose up at anybody who even talks about this stuff, even though to them it's like, of course you know about what's going on here.
As someone,
and if it's not addressed, it's just, you know.
As someone who devoted a huge part of my life before Jordan Peterson to studying Carl Jung, I think he did a fundamental disservice by turning into a self-help racket, but that's another.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, that's an interesting story about Peterson remakes himself as a self-help guru, and even worse, as a kind of power and status guru. So it's, you know, it's Gospel of Wealth by the Lobster. We keep interrupting Chaos. So
Chaos Prime. Go for it, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanted to try and relate this back to Zero's question there. But like we were talking a bit about, like, you know, these, you know, private epistemic free spaces, you know, temporary autonomous zones and whatnot, where that are full of people hawking their ideological tidbits and so on, like basically like playing the role, you know, maybe of you know, cognitive arms dealers. But what they're vending are, you know, basically, you know, cult recruitment tools. You know, they're not giving you, you know, I don't know, civilization and its discontents. They're giving you Dianetics. And
right.
Subscribe to the other layer. Oh, by the way, subscribe to Patreon. Subscribe to the Break the Rules Patreon right now. We'll go
join that cult. Yes.
But Chaos, I think this is a lovely thing to say. You're the arms dealer, right? Tell us about, you know, why some thoughts should not be allowed. You know, semiotic thoughts should not be allowed.
Shouldn't be allowed? Oh, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. But I mean, what I was wanting to get at was that yeah, there's a level of value system to the arms dealing thing that, like, you know, I don't have a cult like Yudkowsky does or you know, Jones does or Q does or so on, where, like, you know, I'm trying not to, you know, put things in front of people that are going to limit them, that are going to suck them into some space. I'm trying to put things in front of people that are going to help them do whatever it is that they want to do. You know, that enables them in you know, whatever desires.
Affordances,
yeah, provides them affordances, yes. And you know, with Zero's question, you know, where is Bronze Age mindset fit into this? You know, Bronze Age pervert, he feels like a pretty deep player to me. Like, you know, Bronze Age mindset is definitely has a lot of ways in which it is a, you know, some kind of reactionary recruitment tool and so on. But I feel like it also goes beyond that too. I think that if somebody is you know, a revolutionary socialist or insurrectionary anarchist or what have you, or, you know, I don't know, you know, super woke kind of person, you know, if they were to read Bronze Age mindset and, like, ignore all the bits that are, you know, odious to them, that, like, they could take a lot away from it that would you know, help them, you know, do what they're going to do. like, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, BAP wants people to, you know, be healthier and stronger and more aggressive and more beautiful. Like, and he thinks that if they accomplish this, this will make them reactionary. And, you know, is he right? I don't know. You know, if being healthy and strong and beautiful makes people reactionary, well, you know, I mean, maybe it's not so bad then.
Well, I have it right here by my tape.
Wow.
So,
wow, you and I are like the only people who've ever bought the actual print on demand.
Oh no!
What is? Let me ask you something. What is the appeal of Bronze Age mindset? So, you know, let's just say for research purposes, right? The thing that struck me the most about that was this thing that comes near the end.
Call from your dean tomorrow.
From my dean, no, but you look right. So the thing that struck me the most was this kind of odd confession about being a young gay child, right, in high school. This comes near the end. It's the most revealing part of the book, right? To my mind. Yeah, it's like, it's, you know, how God, and you guys have to pull this out.
Whatever it was, I didn't read it that way. I don't remember there being a.
Yeah,
there was always speculations that BAP is like gay or something.
Well,
BAP is gay is a meme basically, but like
whatever the truth of this person is, right? We just, you know, just look at the text, right? Yeah. And that, to me, this, you know, after all of this, you know, Nietzschean God stuff, you end up with this kind of childhood moment. And that's maybe the for me, the whatever geometric.
Now I'm going to have to reread it to see what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think there's always been there's always no, that's too deep, because I would be ascribing things to BAP that maybe isn't there. But there is a certain element of the sort of the Hellenism of BAP that is at play with a deeper sort of anti-chthonic sexuality, and there's something there is something there. And if you look at the history of various like millenarian regimes, but not to say that BAP is like, I don't know, creating like, because, you know, the typical like journalistic response, he's a Nazi and all this stuff. I think
it's like Olive Garden Mediterraneanism, right? I mean, it's a bit tricky for me. For me, the question is, what is the continuing appeal of these sorts of things, right? Like this simultaneous worship of Greece and hatred of the Greeks, right? You know, what is this kind of undissolvable core that's sitting for Heidegger, that's sitting for the Nazis? What is that?
It's the energy of it. It's the he contradicts himself constantly, and that's, you know, I think that's, you know, if not intentional, at least inevitable. He's illustrating that cognitive dissonance is an op.
Yes, yeah, but there's the thing with BAP is that he's created, and again, I don't want to like people like, oh, he created a brand and a cult of personality, but the thing is that he created a genuine, I would think, aesthetics of existence that is in play with a number of polysemous elements that all fit together. And I truly think it's very much taking up what the sort of like warrior poet philosopher of old, like at least in terms of creating like a totality, what's the word for it in German? Total art. That you know what I'm talking about.
It's better than the original Klingon, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, from Goethe and onwards. But I feel that there is an appeal because there's genuinely something creative and provocative, and it goes deeper than the standard sort of strains of the right wing, either being like from like, I don't know, American like religious right Protestantism, or like HPD like science evo psych, like you know, Steve Saylor spandrel type of stuff. Well, it cuts a bit deeper, or like, I don't know, like the classicist type of like endeavor stuff. It's something that is for like, it comes at a perfect moment in terms of these various different like dissident strains. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Chaos Prime, there was this part in your thread, your breakdown of it. You say And maybe I'm just asking, maybe it's a stupid question, but like, for clarification, you say, okay, so it's after like only sun and steel will show you the path. I feel like there's some confusion about parentheses in the Iron Age.
Yes. Yeah. Just, you know, it's gliding past the Mishima reference there.
Yeah. But it comes after this one part. City culture hypersexuality as enervation, definitely a thing. Yes. Naturally driven right into utterly predictable trad Vedic Taoist gynoparanoia. Haha, bro, just absorb the feminine godhead into yourself for infinite life force, bro. How is this even possible, bro? So again, this is very much like, you know, the Julius Evola, like solar lunar distinction, the chthonic energy. But what do you mean by like, it's hard to read things in tweet form, obviously. But you're saying that yes, this is true about like this sort of detached hypersexuality within city life, within like the verminoid heap, the bug towers, as Bap would say,
Yes.
the spiritual lesbianism, as Bap would say. But what are you're saying that Bap is demonizing these things? For example, he said, here's a fun trick. See if you can wedge a nail file between Bap's concept of spiritual lesbian and everything else concept of closeted trans man without using the social affiliation dimension. That was another confusing thing. Maybe you could speak on like...
I mean, that's basically just saying that, you know, what Bap is talking about when he's talking about a spiritual lesbian is like what anybody else would talk about in describing a closeted trans man. It's, you know, someone with a female body and a male spirit.
Yeah, and this is like the ultra solar masculine, like you must like eliminate like the young Martin Sheen face lesbianism from your soul. So this is like Dravidian. Then you say Andaluvian civilization determined via gnosis to have been ended by spontaneously rising Emprim death squads. Hollow Earth inhabited by noble Andaluvian trickster remnants, and also evil antediluvian death robots. I guess
the Deros in there.
Yeah, I guess what Bap is saying is that there was a sort of like the Faustian spirit of certain civilizations, like whether it's Indo-European, whatever, that it has a tendency to like defeat itself. But this is like, I'm reading through it, and maybe if you wrote something like a long form, because these are like you're formulating these like critiques.
Several people asked me to write a long form review. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because these critiques are so good. I feel that like the usual these critiques
I probably seem to be engaging with it a little more, you know, deeply, even if I'm you know, being a little tongue in the cheek than people often are. Yeah.
But what is the fundamental critique of Bronze Age mindset? And saying as someone who's, you know, I wouldn't consider myself, I don't know. I mean, I consider, I don't know if you like identify as like, I'm a Baptist, I'm this, you know, but like, I do feel that Bap is like, I think one of the most important thinkers of our generation. Unironically, I'm not saying this as a mean. He is, in my opinion, one of the most important thinkers. But what is your, like, if you were to summarize your critique of Bap?
I put my core critique in the chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me.
Ooh. And guys, while we are looking for it, don't forget to subscribe to break the rules. We're getting more subscribers, and I really appreciate this. Everybody here, you are amazing. You are all beautiful people. So here, I'm going to post this in the BTR chat.
Youth and beauty are universally hated in almost all human societies in history. We've reached levels of reactionary imaginary history that shouldn't even be possible.
I mean, come on. Youth and beauty hate. Okay, like, you're killing me here, Bap.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there's this lovely remark. I just saw this in the chat here, which is Philip Daniel, on Otto Weininger. So this is, I mean, I think it's a really wonderful reference, right? Weininger being this author, popular author, Jewish, homosexual, decided that, you know, both being Jewish and being homosexual was this feminine principle that needed to be, or, you know, needed to necessarily be, you know, subordinated to the masculine principle of the German spirit. I mean, it's a kind of Bappian form. I'm not a scholar of Weininger. I know it simply through Ray Monk's biography of Wittgenstein. Hugely influential for Wittgenstein, which is bizarre, right? This, you know, sort of kind of Jordan Peterson thing, right? This kind of esoteric teaching is important for this person who ends up being a major figure in analytic philosophy,
Like
one of the founding figures.
figure. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So there's something odd. I mean, I keep going back to the psychoanalytic thing, which is what's the underlying driver here?
I can try to explain
for the appeal. Yeah, go for it, Lev.
Before you do that, Lev, let me just shout out to Philip Daniel. He's friend of the show. Philip Daniel, go to his YouTube channel. He is an amazing composer.
Amazing.
If you are into 20th century atonal music, from Schoenberg to Legge, to Bartok, he is amazing. He contributed music recently to a painting video I have that I came out with yesterday. So yeah, shout out to Philip Daniel. Go to his YouTube channel. But yeah, sorry, Lev, cut you off. I just had to.
I'm gonna post both of them right now. I'm trying to find Philip Daniel's amazing organ piece, and I'm gonna post it as soon as I find it. But I'm gonna post your painting video tweet over here in the meantime. But what I was getting to here is, Simon, have you heard of Kundalini?
Oh God.
Here it comes.
I mean, not enough to say yes. Right?
Okay. So Kundalini, okay, this is again one of these things where a person starts talking about it, and people aren't prepared.
Am I going to need a trigger warning on this?
No,
only if I start talking.
It's not Gundalini, it's Kundalini. There's a difference. It could save your life. Okay, so anyway, this is one of those things though where a person talks about it and people are like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" But in Hinduism or the Advaita Vedanta, whatever you want to call it, in yoga, there is this practice of breathing and meditation that results in people feeling an energy come up through their spine, and I think that this is something that, again, upon personal experimentation, personal experience, this is something that for me exists, and other people have also replicated similar things with their own bodies. The idea being that a lot of these things that they talk about in the woo sphere of chakras and prana, all these various things talking about like these primordial systems of energy that are within the human body. I do think that this is something that exists. But with that comes the fact that if it exists, and if it is something that, at least for me, it hasn't resulted in this yet, but other people who have had these experiences, they say that it has, where supposedly once this energy that feels like, I would describe it like a liquid snake in your back, moving around up and down, doing swirls.
Kundalini energy. It's this energy snake that coils around your spine.
Exactly.
In various yogic practices, yeah.
And when it goes up, the idea is that you are supposed to have an experience of oneness with the universe, and it's not like finality where that's it. You don't have to be reborn again. No, it's just like it's a very important experience nonetheless. But the idea here is that human beings are primarily this energy force. This is who we are. This is a part of us being connected to God, and this energy expresses itself through. We have the what was it? Rajas, Sattvas, and what was the last one? The last one's like what was it?
Rajasic,
Sattvic, and the last one was the Thomas. That's it, the lazy one. So Thomas is supposed to be this feeling of not really wanting to do anything, of destruction, and Rajas is supposed to be the opposite, like the feeling of energy radiating out.
Yeah.
Rawr.
Exactly. Exactly.
Go.
And that's much more of the Bronze Age mindset type energy that I think would also be seen when people admire, like, Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan or any of these people. They would see, like, oh, this energy bursting forth, like all this raw power. And then Sattva, it's I'd say an equivalent, but inwards, where you take this energy and you try to go in and connect yourself to the source, which I think is what a lot of the more esoteric aspects of various religions and mystery cults try to do. And the idea for me here is try to figure out, what the hell are we? What are we as far as, like, we grow up, we're born, we grow up, like, we only know the things that have been passed down to us through our family and society. But as far as these much more primordial aspects of our own body, of things that we can unlock through doing these various meditations and breathing techniques and seeing like a white light in the center and various geometric shapes. And I know I'm a broken record, but again, my limit has so far been being able to see a three-dimensional DNA helix that I can rotate by thinking about it. And I don't mean imagining it, I mean actually closing my eyes and having the electric signals inside of my brain generate this image. So the reason why I connected again to Bronze Age mindset and all of that is, like Graham Hancock said, we are a species with amnesia. And I think a lot of people are resonating with this idea that there is a lot more to human nature than meets the eye, and a lot more just like our origin, who we are, what we're capable of achieving. And people, I think, are very thirsty for, obtaining that kind of power, seeking it out. And I think people use various demagogues that have existed throughout history as kind of, as exemplars of this, where even if I can't achieve it, at least I can be part of something where there is going to be some representation of that vital force manifesting itself in the world, where today I'm only seeing like lazy people and drugged up people and losers and society, that's the impression that people have. That's why they seek it out. But I think it does come from a positive yearning to get to a higher state of reality. As far as how to go about it, I go for the individual path, but that's kind of how I see people operating when seeking things like Bronze Age mindset.
Well, this is great, Levin. You're triggering all these thoughts here, and so let me try to untangle this a little bit. And I should say, I'm a non-overlapping magisteria guy, right? So this is great. I come from this position, right, that the anti-fascist stance is the stance associated with the unlimited development of the human spirit, right? That's for me, that is what it means. These are not equivalent concepts, but these are very deeply related. And one of the great anti-fascists was Umberto Eco. Also, I wouldn't say the inventor of semiotics, but the interpreter of someone like Charles Sanders Peirce for the modern era. So, Eco being this, I think, this really foundational thing. And what you're helping make clear for me is an essay that Eco wrote years ago about the open work. And there's this funny thing. He does this funny move where he says, "Look, take a James Bond novel, like one of those pulp novels," and he uses James Bond as the example. You would think that, this is crap, this is trash, and what it is that it's trash because it's overdetermined. It's not like, Ulysses, it opens out, it's this infinite text, right? And Ecoworks is kind of the opposite, because what the James Bond novel enables you to do is project basically anything onto it, right? Bond, these are these sort of ciphers onto which you can project, and this is not an Eco now, it's, you got your psychomachia, you've got your internal battles, you've got your experience in life. And this Bond novel is, for a certain moment in cultural history, this is the perfectly blank projection screen, right? This is the high def thing that you can then actually watch yourself in. And what I wonder, hearing you talk about BAP, and at the same time describing these sort of very profound embodied experiences, is that I wonder if BAP is like, for some people, like this Bond novel, right? It's a thing onto which you can project a far more complex internal reality. And it just so happens that this object has the right contours to kind of, to cancel out whatever distorting world one otherwise inhabits. Does that make sense?
It can't just have a random assortment of symbols that people will then fill the pieces in themselves. Because I think that with James Bond, for example, with James Bond, for example, he is a ladies' man, he has the gun and all that. Yep. There are certain symbols, archetypal symbols that come out here. Same thing with same thing with, let's say, a lot of these shapes that have been used, and I would include things like the swastika, for example, and various other imperial seals, like the eagle with the wings spread out, reminiscent of the Farvahar in Zoroastrianism, which is also reminiscent of the Egyptian sun, and as well as like the imperial eagle in Rome, as well as 1940s Germany. So the idea here, I think, that when people see these various things, like these very straight-looking, symbols like thunder, lightning, all that stuff, I think to them that is also a reflection of power, energy bursting forth. And these are also things that we could see when we go outside, when we see a flower. Even when we see a tree, for example. I recently posted a thing on Twitter about the Vajra, which is the symbol that's used in Buddhism, but it's also used in other religions as well as this lightning rod. You could say this is like the OG lightning rod wielded by the god Zeus. And when I went out into the garden, I observed a tree, and I noticed for a second there, especially since now the trees, aren't covered with leaves, but this one is. But still, you could see over here that this tree, it's like a Vajra, in the sense that the bottom is like the top, and it's like energy that's bursting forth from the top and the bottom. And this is supposed to be one of the most destructive weapons of all time. But the interesting flip side to that is that in Buddhism, the Buddha was able to close the Vajra up, and that to me is a symbol of going inwards, where this destructive power can be reused for different ends, basically, but it's still just as powerful, only not going out, now going in. But again, like, my big problem, though, is that when people take that at face value, all these symbols, they ignore all the horrible things that go on in the midst of them to completely innocent people, wherein, like me personally, if people wanted to go off somewhere and participate in one of these flower wars like they had back in South America, or Mexico rather, or participate in some kind of a great battle with people who consent to it. It's like, yeah, let's like challenge ourselves to, like fight with swords and stuff. Great, like go on, do that. I'm not going to stop you. But when you take like innocent, Jewish grandmas, and just do all that stuff to them, or like anybody for that matter that does not want to participate in it, when you're already a society that's supposed to get to a higher level of understanding of, like, let's not take the innocent, women, children, and men for that matter, who don't want to participate in this and destroy them while, oogling at these, radiant symbols of energy. That, I think, is true evil in a way. Because here you have a society like Germany that's already gotten to the point of creating beauty while at the same time balancing that with, being a lot more humanistic than, let's say, Japan was at around the same time that Mozart existed.
Some people say that the beauty itself contributed to that spirit of destruction, but
this is the standard thing. Like, fascism is aestheticized politics, right?
Yeah.
And I maybe one other way to say this, and this came up in the comment, right? It's like, why do people project the same things onto BAP, right? And one thing, it's funny, like you read someone like Andrea Long Chu, right, who writes this crazy book on women. And there's clearly some kind of sympathetic resonance there with the alt-right, with the incels, with Reddit. There's something that makes sense to her. These are mental affordances that people use, right? They're switches that can go in either direction. They're levers that can do different things. And the externalization of them, if it wasn't tragic, it would be childish. Right. The idea that I'm going to make these mental affordances, these things that give me a grip, let's say, on a psychic reality, on an unconscious embodied experience, to say that those things are actually real, meaning physical reality, and vice versa, to treat people as symbols within your own psychomachia. That is, if we're talking about evil, that may be one of the deepest sources of it.
And it is, I think, about finding a balance here. Like, because when we rob society of beauty, like what I think is happening, again, in the example of last summer, people were tearing down these statues. And again, regardless of any of the undertones of like who these people were and all that stuff, just the image of a statue being raised down and graffiti being sprayed over, it's like, what, this is the best you can fucking do? It's like, okay, good luck.
No, but
good luck trying to get something to as high of a level as that statue was.
I feel like there's this, I don't know, there's this need.
There's an aesthetic in the destruction as well.
Yes.
Like there is a certain kind of death drive that makes people impelled in that direction to create things that are being destroyed and are in a state of decay or, ruin.
But it's not beautiful though. I think that's, you could say it's beautiful in its own way.
It's the aesthetics
of ruin, Wordsworth, right?
Sure. But you
Urban
wouldn't have those
exploration is a
aesthetics.
beauty in
But you
itself.
wouldn't have those
Come
aesthetics.
on, Lev.
of
You've never
ruin.
seen a beautiful piece of ruin porn?
No,
Right,
that's
exactly.
Yeah,
Right. I
urban
mean,
exploration.
yeah.
No, but here's the
Yeah.
difference. You
But
wouldn't have
this
that
is
ruin
different.
porn.
This is politically motivated destruction.
Yeah.
That's
No,
the
but also you
difference, I
wouldn't have
think.
that ruin porn if not for the ruin. In other words, that ruin makes the ruin porn. If you just have a bunch of graffiti on just like a wall, if the graffiti's great, if it's like some graffiti that's been, created by some
By
great
not a toy, Lev. By not a toy. Who is an actual
Exactly.
tagger.
Well, okay.
So-
Yeah.
We were talking about cyberpunk last week, right? And I think that's a pretty good example of the same thing, where that's definitely, I would say, a bad reality is kind of the typical view of that. That it's like a super decadent, late capitalist kind of, the society's been totally stratified. Nobody wants to live there. It's a hellscape, whatever. And the thing that draws everyone towards it is the aesthetics of it, because the world that this late capitalism builds is just really appealing to some kind of fascinated part of our psyche. And it's maybe like a darker reflection of who we are, that we're attracted to something that we know is evil or we know is going to hurt us. But I don't think that you can say that that's like a rejection of aesthetics to build that kind of a world, even though it's transparently constructed. Like in the case of a cyberpunk future, that's obviously a bunch of marketing techniques that are being used to conform people's brains, and it's very much in service of the politics of the world, but it's still at the same time something that's appealing on like a primeval level.
Well, you'd want to play it. You may want to watch a movie about it, but would you rather live there or live somewhere with a lot of nice trees and good architecture? That's the thing at the end of the day for me. People, I think, are going to be drawn more to the Parthenon and Pantheon rather than to some oddly shaped glass structure, with
but yet
with a bunch
we're
of graffiti
drawn
on it.
to them because, again, this is Heidegger on the work of art. We're drawn to them because they're dead, because we've taken them and put them in the museum, and therefore we've given each other we've given ourselves an aesthetic space.
I don't know.
Well, they're
man.
dead in the sense that they don't serve like a purpose of uniting like the world that created it.
Yeah, but
they're not dead in the sense that they do posit a trans-historical truth, at least in my opinion. But yeah,
I mean,
Well,
what
again,
is
they go-
like?
Yeah.
Go on, Lev. Sorry.
No.
I wanted to push back though on what you said about Umberto Eco though. But sorry, Lev, go ahead.
No. I would love for Gio to do that, but before that, I just want to say again, like with these, with like classical or neoclassical architecture, what do you have?
Cyberdeco.
Yes,
That's in the chat. Cyberdeco. That's
Cyberdeco, yeah.
There you go.
I think that stuff like this is incredibly psychedelic, and I would say that it's more psychedelic, a lot of this old school architecture, than than a lot of the art that the hippies ended up making. I truly believe that. Or if you look at the old Indian temples, for instance, you would also see that same kind of fractal, sacred geometry, whatever you want to call it. Like, look at this building, for instance. This building is an example of a DMT trip. Just the way that it's done over here with these successive layers. And the same thing could be said about various other buildings, like buildings in Vienna, buildings in Italy, like buildings in the Vatican. It's all the same structure of sacred geometry, and then the thing in the center, like the central light out of which everything else comes out. Like these structures, they keep repeating on and on and on. In fact, I'll post an image of it a little bit later. But again, this idea is that people are attracted to all this stuff. But the problem is that, again, when people assign, various leaders and give them free reign, this is where a lot of perversity ends up happening too. Because people think that, if I'm going to get this leader who talks about, leading this clean and righteous life, everything's going to be good. But again, like a lot of things that end up happening in Nazi Germany, for instance, is that people had free reign to do whatever the fuck they wanted with people. And the things that they ended up doing with people were horrible. And it's like that's beauty. That's what I mean? Like that's the other side of it. It's like I can't make that much sense out of the connection between the two, but it seems like in that case, when you gave people free reign of a certain type to go out and do whatever they wanted.
Well, let me just jump in here, Lev. I think it's a useful thing to say, right? Just, and maybe it's the academic in me, right? What we're talking about here are various myths that we're going to attach the name Nazism to, right? So there's a historical account, historical facts, right? So I think what you're talking about here is a certain thing that one does that, you're going to say, okay, we're going to put this onto a Nazi mythology. We're going to put this together. There's two pieces here. You're bringing up these beautiful images, right? You're talking, I think, in a sense about the neuroscience of appreciation, right? There are ways in which these objects are interacting with our visual system in deeply compelling ways, and this is something we see in psychedelic experiences as well, right? There's, however many it is these days, 8 layers of the visual system down which the raw signal gets processed. You can push at any point, right? Cartoon looks real. So, there's that chunk. And then there's this question like, well, what is the aesthetic experience, which is a much higher level question.
Yeah.
And so, look, fake Kant, right? Aesthetics is a fundamentally private experience, a private judgment that you believe has a universal transsubjective claim.
Through an impartiality, right?
Exactly, right. So this is where one starts to see the connection between aesthetics and something like fascism, where you have this compelling private judgment, you show somebody an image, and yet out of that, they draw this account of the way one should behave towards others, so one should understand others. And so I think that's, there's a neuroscientific experience or like a neurological experience of beauty, which I think you want to separate this from a certain kind of political, fascistic aesthetics. You don't want to discount this private, the power of this private experience, and yet at the same time, you want to be able to distinguish it. So maybe that's one of the challenges.
Well, I feel that we shouldn't distinguish it, but maybe that makes me a fascist. Who knows?
Well, you wanted to get into the Umberto Eco stuff, and I would love that as well. Just real quick over here. This is one of the images that I wanted to show. So again, like everything coming from a central point here, and this star over here, the 5-pointed star on the top side with the balls around it, that's a experience that I have in meditation. So it's like, I think this is something, again, I don't think it's just, well, this is what I think. I think that this is something that is inherently linked to the human psyche, that they're able to perceive these things.
But it's linked to a human psyche that was created in civilizations that had a capacity for a what would you call it, a monoperspective vision, the heliosphere that Sloterdijk called it.
It's culture is actually, the power. Let me just jump in here because I've wondered about this. Not me. People have done studies on the effect, and this is just one example of visual illusions, optical illusions. And there's some really powerful ones that involve assumptions, let's say, about converging parallel lines. There was this belief for many, many years that this was culturally determined, right? So if you went out and found people who lived in cultures where there were no parallel lines, they wouldn't be vulnerable to this. Turns out not to be the case, actually. There's actually, the visual system was coded up really, really early. The only thing that does seem to happen is that the response to visual illusions is weaker during puberty, sort of during this rush of hormones. But actually there's, these 5 circles, this sort of thing that Lev is talking about. I'm not going to say that this response is entirely culturally determined. So I just wanted to jump in there, Diaz. I'm sorry about that, but there's something that struck me.
Yeah, that's. I do. Yeah, there is a universality.
Well,
there is.
Just as another example, and again, for all the people, I apologize, who have already heard this ad nauseum from previous shows, but of course, Simon is new here, and I really appreciate him coming on, so I just want to make it clear that what it at least appears for me to be, is a framework of experiencing all kinds of visuals in this, I guess, matrix would be a pretty good word for it, even though I guess it's kind of hackneyed, since it's been used so much. But it's basically like, here, I could show you one last representation of it right over here. This is the one. This
you
is
can
the
say
image.
Indra's net if you don't like saying matrix anymore.
Yeah, Indra's net is great. So this one is an image that I drew based on how I think this whole thing is working. So do the Wim Hof method. I have this reaction to it where these lights over here, like the balls in the periphery, I barely see them, but they're just spinning in the periphery. And then I have this this halo over here in the middle, and then these these several little balls which seem like a mirror image of the peripheral thing. The interesting thing about these is that these would manifest as various other shapes. So for example, imagine from the center, lines go down and create an arc like this. And this arc is also made of lines, kind of like a smiley face. And again, what does that remind you of? That symbol in Hinduism where you would have like the dot and then the crescent below the dot, which is also, you could say, found in Islam as well. But same thing with, let's say, a triangle or a star, like I had the 5-pointed star over here, where there was a literal 5-pointed star that manifested right in the center of my vision. So when it comes to this manifesting of shapes and the way it works, it seems to me that there is some kind of framework, some kind of architecture that's capable of generating these shapes in particular ways and interacting in such a way where you have like two circles. Like, let's say, again, back to light, generation, the blooming of a flower, the sprouting of a tree or whatever, like something coming out of like a single seed, a single origin point spreading out. So one example is you would have two of these lights spreading out. So you would have a dot, out of this dot come out these lines, and all these lines have little dots that are at the end of it, you know, kind of like sperm or dragons or whatever you want to call them. So then you would have these circles meeting up together like so, intersecting. And when that happens, and this happened a couple of times, this intersection would then start to create a DNA helix. And that DNA helix, you know, would be like a line, and then like the two swirling lines around it would then start to spin around and create another structure on top of it, made out of countless spinning blue and purple lights, which I can then zoom in, zoom out of, and rotate just by using my brain, just by thinking about it. And one last thing to add to this is that this area over here in the middle, it starts to gyrate kind of like a small motor, where it would physically go like that when this whole zoetrope effect is happening. And again, it's not just me imagining it, it's like actual electric impulses or whatever you want to call it is creating an image in the dark of all of this stuff going on. So again, like when I take a look at that and when I take a look at other experiences that people have had, I'm leaning on the fact that this is something that's inherent to many, if not all, human beings as being part of something we are all capable of experiencing. And I can't just say that, oh, it's just an optical illusion or it's a hallucination. It may be. I mean, I don't know. But it is very interesting just how much the brain is capable of generating in this way. And that's all I want to say. Then I want to go to Gio about Umberto Eco. But I'm curious, Simon, what you think of that.
I mean, what you're making me think of, and this is, and I'm forgetting the name of the philosophers who pioneered this, something called the interface theory of perception, right? Which is our brain, and we, to me, this is something we see a little bit in how the visual system works, right? To me, we are given an image of the world that is essentially composed of affordances enabled in order to ensure our evolutionary survival and evolution broadly conceived, right? There's a lot of flexibility here, right? So Fortran was written for differential equations, but you can also write Facebook in Fortran. So this is not a deterministic thing. But the thing that we consider, and even someone like this Heidegger guy would consider reality, is something that is entirely constructed as an interface. There are no files on your computer, right? The actual machine that you're interacting with is this like hellscape of transistors. And so the first thing I would say is absolutely, right? Like the extent to which your brain confabulates continuously is, and optical illusions are just a really lovely, normie example of this, right? It's inarguable that your brain is misrepresenting something that to you seems to be qualia, right? It's absolutely uncontradictable, and yet it's false. So, this is something we know already. And, part of, let's say cognitive science, part of understanding how the brain interacts with society is saying, well, look, how far can we go down in the stack?
Yeah.
Right. How far can we go down? You disorient your brain in a certain way, you're going to start seeing chunks of your visual system kick in that are usually hidden from you. Your edge detectors, right? you may have seen these machine learning devices that we call dreaming, right? They sort of magnify the pattern recognition in some part of it. You get these kind of trippy rainbow colored dogs coming out of dogs. You've probably seen these. So, we can even generate some of these, which tells us something about the underlying code. And that's, of course, deeply, deeply exciting, right? So I think that's maybe my response here. It's a very respectful response. I hope I say this is, I guess I would just argue that, optical illusions are not trash, right? They're actually a really simple way to understand that you're running many layers of software between yourself and what you would consider to be unmediated reality.
But even
but the interesting
but
part
even the
for
aspect of like Heideggerian throwness, like in
I just because this guy's a Nazi, I just have to dump on Heidegger. But Lev, sorry, you were gonna.
No,
you were gonna
but
say
the interesting part of me, the interesting part of this whole thing for me is not so much that I could see these various things, people could see all kinds of weird stuff. The interesting part for me is specifically the control that I have over the imagery, where again, this is a much more, let's say, primitive example over here in comparison to the DNA one, but these are A, B, these are letters of the alphabet that I was able to generate by moving these swirls of blue and purple light around.
This is great, right? This is like classic level crossing, right? I mean, what you're describing here is high-level conceptual thought. So yeah, high-level conceptual thought, right? Interacting with these much lower-level visual experiences, right? This back and forth between, reasonable thought or reason, or at least, ego, the psychoanalysts would say the ego, and these things below, right? So this goes or can go in both directions, that you can generate really compelling visual experiences by things that you've learned at a much higher conscious level. Classic example of this, and again, like this is sort of the trivial version, right? Is things like how you miss typos. You see a doubled word like the in a text, your brain just eliminates it.
Yeah.
Why does it eliminate? You don't see it. Why? Because conceptually speaking, there are no thes that go together, right? You know how an English sentence works, and so you silently eliminate one of them, and yet that percolates all the way down. So this is sort of a direction this way, right, where a kind of rational belief, at least one that's open to examination, is forcing a visual perception, right, that you can't see the typo. Just as, of course, you get the other direction, like some visual illusions make, black squares look red or something, right? This case, it goes the other direction, right? The low level
you can't even see the gorilla that's in the shot. There are examples like this.
Exactly.
But
so
the thing, But the thing that really
yeah.
gets me, though, is that example of the letters of the alphabet. I'd say that's pretty damn primitive in comparison to the DNA one, because I don't have the Photoshop file here. But just again, to paint an example for you, imagine an incredibly complex looking three-dimensional structure of like a dome, like, I don't know, the dome on top of the U.S. Capitol building, that is rotating around at incredibly fast speed around this little wide DNA helix in the middle. And now imagine that you are able to just zoom out and then just rotate it as if you're operating a 3D program like Maya. That's a funny name, by the way, for a program, right? Maya Illusion. But anyway, so imagine you're operating this thing just with your mind, being able to go in and out. And for me, it's a very interesting thing. Again, like I'm not leaping to conclusions of what exactly this is, but this is like a whole other level that I don't think people really talk about that much, as far as what the brain is able to generate, not just in terms of having certain blobs sort of look like the letters of the alphabet, but this is like actually having a three-dimensional structure that can be navigated in 3D space inside of your mind.
But I mean, this is wonderful. I mean, two things strike me here. One is, I think about Jung in the Red Book, right? This sort of complete breakdown he has, where it's unclear what he's seeing and what he's confabulating. The other thing that strikes me is, the use of psychedelics. I mean, this is,
no psychedelics. I've been clean for several years. No psychedelics at all. Completely sober.
I gotta just put this out here, right? And I also, Lev, I totally respect that. I mean, I just, suggesting here, right, that psychedelic experiences, or at least learning the ways in which those emerge, is probably one of the, best sources of mental health that we have under the right conditions. And, this is cognitive behavioral therapy to, a much, much higher degree. You might think of CBT as a mechanism that, you have a rational encounter with a therapist, with a trained therapist, where your goal is to manipulate underlying things you don't usually have access to, things that cause you anxiety, pain. The psychedelic experience potentially, by enabling this level crossing in the reverse direction or making it more porous, may be a deeply profound source. It's not something that we've been able to study for many. I mean, not to go on the decriminalization of psychedelics. So that seems to be a big gap. I will also say, right, it doesn't require these. So there's this level. I would say that maybe the psychedelic experiences on some continuum with the things we're describing here that are not pharmacologically induced, right? So I
well,
hope that's
it's
clear.
I think it's more
Actually,
from
I
the DMT effect of doing the breathing techniques. I would love for you to meet later on John Chavez, who did the documentary that I'll send you later, called DMT Quest, where he talks a lot about how these various techniques result in the uptake of DMT in the human body. And again, this is like the same chemical that people take that go on all these journeys.
It's intense trip.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
All this like, oh, sorry, did I cut you off? Maybe just.
No, please. I'm going to say I am deeply late for a colleague of mine, so I may go in a little bit, but this
well,
is,
I definitely want to get
I
to
was just
Geo.
gonna. So two things.
Geo, please,
'cause
yeah.
Lev like took us on a trip there. I feel like
Man.
I'm out of my head. What was I gonna say? One,
fascism.
Okay, no, I'll get
yes.
to that. Number one, I think this language is, to me at least, like a bit alienating in terms of like thinking of the mind as like a software program, and it's like the mental, it's like the mental health industry is intersecting with like these entheogens. It's like, but that's just my own like.
I think that, so just to be clear, I think it's a really great point. I'm stuck in a certain frame. We're stuck in a certain frame in our account.
Right. But also the frame,
yeah.
like, I mean, as soon as we mentioned BAP, it's like we went to like Nazism. Like, again, it's like, to me, my critique is, okay, I'm saying this because, of course, like, to them, contemporary anti-fascists, everyone's a fascist. I guess I'm pretty much a fascist according to them. But my critique of echoes fascism would be this, like, this, how shall I say this? Again, it's almost like impossible to argue with, because then it's like you're projecting like, okay, actually it's the fascist inside of your head that's like arguing with the framework of fascism. But in actuality, a good friend of mine who is an outside thinker, DC Miller, he wrote this excellent article. It's called Anti-Fascism. I highly recommend everyone go read it. Where essentially like the personality type of the anti-fascist in some ways mirrors like a weird sort of inversion of this personality type of the fascist. But that's another direction. My problem with fascism is again this sort of this equation with Nazism, 20th century fascism, and traditionalism proper, in terms of like at least this like what I mean by tradition, I mean capital T traditionalist school, obviously, but to say that like the cult of tradition itself breeds in a sense fascism is sort of almost like a selective ignoring of actual fascist ideology from like Gentile onwards, and it's just like hyper focusing on like the Nazi cult of Thule. But also another thing too is I think that fascism has been used, it's been taken up again with like another book would be like the Wilhelm Reich book about like the authoritarian personality, where it's like this hermeneutics of suspicion of all things that are contra the narrative of like, I don't know, like what would you call it? Progressive modernity, cathedral, like you name it. If you're against the narrative, then
it's tricky there, because I mean, Adorno, I'm thinking of as the authoritarian personality character, right?
Right.
Frankfurt School was a critical stance, right? It was not a positive.
Yes,
I would say
of-
Frankfurt School was not a positive program. So just to interrupt there, but
Right.
go on. Yeah.
No, but I would say like the points that are brought up, it's really it just contributes to the confusion around the discourse of like the value of tradition and things of that nature, and the value of an aesthetic, at least an aesthetic tradition. But also like, I mean, see, to me, I'm way more sympathetic to Adorno than I am to like the, contemporary anti-fascist discourse. I don't know. I feel that a lot of this stuff has been contorted over the years to for certain political narratives, and I don't know. Maybe it's just my own projection because whatever. I'll say no more. I'll say no more.
I'm
My
thinking,
own
I mean,
politics, but yeah, you go.
I mean, there's a really challenging book. I forget if it's Adorno or Horkheimer wrote it. The Cult of Authenticity, right? Which
Yeah,
is,
that's Adorno. Yeah, that's
Adorno. This is, I mean, this is this really challenging text because
Mm.
you know, it's asking us to examine a concept that we actually often consider, certainly, you know, the kind of existentialist moment, right? We consider to be foundational, and it's asking us to try and take that apart. That's a hard thing to do, right? You know, I think there's no recipe book for recognizing, let's say, what I would call it like eco anti-fascism or eco anti-fascism, which is meaning Umberto Eco's account, having lived through the fascist moment, right? That position, I want to call it authentic, but I can't now because of Adorno. You know, how do you recognize that as opposed to whatever, you know, contemporary go along with it discourse? One answer is, what affordances to flourishing does it give you, right? You know, to what extent is it generative for the human being? Those are things, but those are hard to put in a recipe book, right?
Because even the
hard
act of
things.
putting them into like a framework is itself going to succumb to like an ideological narrative of what even constitutes flourishing, right? So
right. I mean, you know, to predefine it, to prestate it, is to. I mean, and this goes back to this story we had about the creation of an idol of reason that happens in rationalism, that happens in maybe in, you know, neo-rationalism as well. Instead of you know, you worship this kind of fake Rousseau state if you're a James T. Scott fanboy, not Scott himself, but you know, if you create a fantasy, a T-shirt out of it. So I don't know, Jay, if that speaks to your concern.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, a lot of it, yeah.
But what would you say he was wrong about?
This warrants like another like 3-4 hours.
Yeah, well, we're definitely Simon. I would love to have you back on where we can get.
I'm very grateful to spend time with you guys. It's very, thank you, and thanks for sharing some of these ideas. Anyway, go on, Lev. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say that with Umberto Eco, I still am curious. I want to read about him as well. I want to read her fascism, and I'm really curious about what exactly, not to talk about like people today who would call anything to the right of Bernie Sanders fascist, but if we're talking about his specific critique, what exactly, what problems Geo sees in that's what I'm curious about. But
well,
also,
I would say that Foucault's Pendulum, the book he wrote, is almost like strikingly similar to like contemporary internet discourse nowadays of like,
that's great. That's a great point, Geo.
Taking fringo texts and like examining them, like totally schizo posters that are like buried under like, well, back then buried in like some ancient bookstore, but now it's like buried in like a Usenet forum that was archived by Wayback Machine. Like it's like this uncovering of like this deep arcana from like fundamentally like yeah, whatever.
That's amazing. Because when I read Foucault's Pendulum, you know, it had been years since I had been like running around with like, you know, the happy-go-lucky little occultists on Usenet on alt.magic with a K and whatnot.
Oh my god!
And reading Foucault's Pendulum, it was like coming home to me. It was like, oh my god, I recognize all the people in this book. You know, I used to go to, you know, picnics with them and tell them like, hey Bill, tell me something not pertaining to my grade, and he gave me the Master Mason word and shit like that.
My grade, yeah. Foucault's Pendulum is, I mean, it's funny. I hadn't thought about that book for years and years, but it's you know, I guess today we call it hyperstition or something, right? Yeah. These very compelled personalities who constantly send in books, the way in which they're taken advantage of by a vanity press, like let's call that Facebook, right? The way in which they're flattered and cajoled and in fact give up value for what they consider to be their deepest insights. It's Facebook, right? The way in which then Facebook tries to take control of this, right? So then the press that the narrator controls says, oh great, we're going to assemble this, and then lo and behold, at the end he's hiding in some museum, right, being chased down. And you could see this as a kind of bizarre prescient allegory for you know exactly what's happened, which is certainly Facebook, in making money off of, let's call it the vanity press of conspiracy, did not expect this to boomerang back on them in the way that it did. That's great. I have to reread that book.
I just love the idea of current internet culture mirroring like 90s internet occultist culture.
but also I would say that another problem would be this like insistence that fascism is, and this is just a scholarly point, like don't, I mean, it may seem like I'm legitimizing fascism. I'm not trying to. Oh, but wait, maybe, perhaps no.
Gio,
I'm
you're
kidding.
killing me. Just say it.
I'm very problematic. No, I would say the problem is the insistence that unfortunately, a lot of academics even that should know better, that like fascism was like a total, like it was an emotive pastiche that was an upsurge of like these longings within the human psyche that didn't have like a coherent ideological framework. When if you read, like, for example, Mussolini's Intellectuals is a good book where like fascists had very, rigorous ideological systems. It's just that like for instance, like I see him in the chat.
They had Heidegger, right? They had Heidegger.
And, they had Heidegger, right? But well, there's debate whether Heideggerianism leads to.
No, but at the end of it,
but no, but I was talking about this.
Just let me have my shit post. On
don't
this.
worry about it.
Yeah.
In the chat, my good friend, modern hermeticist, who is also in academia, by the way, history department. But we were talking about this once about the sort of the purposeful burying of a lot of things, like the latter half of the 20th century in European academia. So for instance, you have the New Age movement, which of course lend itself to a number of radical politics on the New Left and so forth. And there's at least in part some crossing over. There is like certainly a crossover between like anti-psychiatry and the New Left and the New Age movement. I mean, obviously, there's a crossover with the dissident right. Yeah, well, the dissident right is hopefully I maybe I have some small part in that, embracing anti-psychiatry from like, Thomas Saz and Artie Lang and so forth. But no, there's a huge crossover. But yet in Europe at the time, there were the perennialists and there were the traditionalist school. And those were the people that were sort of like kayfabed, like buried out of the institution. And it was like this, and modern hermeticists, he said the best, there was this war between the narrative of like the, occult knowledge between the New Age people, which you could say was on the left, although I wouldn't say they're more libertarian than anything. And like, hardcore traditionalism, Rene Guignon, Julius Evola, it was like the one group won out and the other group was like totally banished from academia forever. And I don't know, it's like, to me, I mean, that could just be my own self-serving narrative, but it just seems that there is an inherent provocative nature to like uncovering, like, I don't know, you're a kid that goes in 4chan and you hear about Julius Evola and then you like read Revolt. I mean, no one actually reads Revolt Against the Modern World. They read like fucking, snippets of it. But it just seems that, where am I getting with this point? There is like there is an eroticism attached to like outsider knowledge, and put it that way. There is a sort of,
but it's
as someone who is also not immune from this by any, I mean, I have fucking Revolt Against the Modern World, right?
But it's not just outsider knowledge. It's not just outsider knowledge for its own sake. It's outsider knowledge with everything that you at least perceive around you to be falling apart. It's this idea, like men among the ruins. What are the ruins? The ruins are all these like clown world people that keep eating burgers all day and that don't really pressure themselves to get higher up.
But offering you the hope of breaking through the world around you into something else.
Yes, but also I would say I would caution against, just really quickly, I would say that the point to like, well, these people don't systematize everything and therefore it's bad. I think, again, this is the same criticism people have of BAP, right? Is that there is no formal systematization of this knowledge, but rather it's like,
it's against that, really.
It's against that, but also it's heavily reliant on an aesthetic of being, which is another thing that a lot of like,
this is the challenge, right? I mean, this is
sorry to cut you off, Chaos Brad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and sorry, Chaos, please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to build off of what Gio was saying about that. Basically, my difficulty with Echo is that he's doing a lot of work to demonize that vitalism, that energy that he's identifying as like this is what fascism is. Fascism can't exist without this, therefore this is what fascism is. That is precisely the energy that BAP is concerned with, like promoting and in some ways resurrecting. That's energy of youth and masculinity and so on. And you know, per Lev, we might as well just call it, you know, Vedic Rajas, because, you know, it's close enough, it makes no difference.
Well,
And you know, and I don't agree with Echo that it is a good idea to just exterminate that because it's bad. I think that is a
I don't think
crucial
what
part of
Echo's
the human
saying. Yeah, I mean, I don't quite think that's what Echo is saying. It's, I guess I'm just struck by this over and over again, where people bring more of themselves to these texts that may be in there, right?
Happens
they
with
bring,
Foucault every single day, yeah.
could be. I mean, like, you know, two quaque, right? But what people bring to these texts is a big chunk of it. And I would say, you know, this is, in some sense, you might say these kind of texts like BAP's text, it's a bit like Facebook, right? There's this illusion that there's something there. What happens is the person brings this stuff there. I try to suggest that this is a little bit like a projection screen. It's a distorted one that enables people to get something done. It provides certain kinds of affordances, but also kind of locks people in, right, to a certain understanding of well, let's say themselves.
Yeah, it may or may not let you see the conquistadorships. Yeah,
right. It's you know, what is, I mean, Lev, you talked about this as a goal of your you know, Geo and Lev, this kind of podcast you have, right? It's like, how do you liberate people, right? What are the ways in which you know, people can, you know, gain affordances to do things? There's just something deeply limited about a lot of these texts that people that show up in our research. There's something off about them, and maybe I still struggle to put my finger on what it is, except to say with chaos that there is some kind of attractor state here where people get stuck, and the only way they leave is, and we talk about this in epistemic counter communities, in order to, you know, regain contact with your potential, you literally have to leave. You have to reject the group. You have to walk away with it. There's no kind of intermediate state there.
Sorry, you know, Bat himself probably illustrates that really well with how he basically turned into a boomer Trump posting account.
The whole thing is odd. I mean, yeah.
I wouldn't. There's reasons behind. I mean, the same could be said of Nick Land, like he's a boomer conservative now.
But what Simon, what you bring up is very, and I don't want to hold you longer here, and I really appreciate.
I don't want to seem. I truly deeply support BAP, but I think there are criticisms that are valid, and I think even he would even admit himself.
Well, just one last thing that I want to leave you with, Simon, because this is something that has been brought up again, you know, in other podcast appearances, that there is an idea of being the individual, going out, pursuing various ideas with people, and then coming back much more informed. My hope is that a lot more people get to do it than a lot less, but at the same time, there are always going to be people out there who are not going to do that. And the big question is, what is the, you know, like they refer to Mahayana Buddhism as, you know, the great vehicle. What is the great vehicle that all these people would be better to be put into? Again, like, not to say, oh, well, there are individuals there who want to do their own thing. Great, do your own thing. But as far as like the rest of the people, again, if society would be judged how they treat those who are like the least well off, that should apply to those who are the least well off, mentally speaking, as far as not stretching out their imagination beyond certain borders. So as far as having a harmonious society where people get along, you know, where people get satisfaction from things in life, where I don't think that satisfaction is being like Walmart Anon, for people who know who I'm referencing here. You know, the guy in 4chan who takes pictures at Walmart of all the sad people that are sitting down in the break room. You know, like, that's not a life.
That guy.
Yeah, that's not a life. But just as an example, like, that's the big question to me, not so much about like the individualists, the specialists who are always going to be curious, who are always going to find each other like we're doing right now, but let's show a little bit of affection and care for the people who are not at that level, because they're still out there. You know?
Yeah. So I mean, there's something ringing my bell. I hate this level talk. I just going to put that out there, right?
Okay.
You know, people want to talk about the ordinary man. I don't think anyone's ordinary. It's fundamental misperception, but maybe that's just my whatever trip, right? Right. This norming language, very dangerous, and I don't mean dangerous like politically. I just mean dangerous morally, dangerous cognitively. But Levi, that's a mild thing. I just sort of speech for you. But I think of this as we had these great debates in the 18th century about democracy and how we'd actually, and this is nuts, right? Democracy was a bad word. And we learned with great difficulty over time how to set up institutions that actually made it work, right? So, hey, we're in control of our destiny. We own our country, whatever these things mean. We actually had to set up and construct cultural traditions, institutional traditions that actually brought the promise of democracy forward. If we think now our challenge is the problem of freedom of thought, right? It's the same thing, right? How do you build institutions that actually magnify this capacity as opposed to, in some strange way, attenuating it? Democracy without institutions is mob rule. What do we do about cognition? What do we do for the fact that we can now actually, the non-privileged person can think for themselves? How do we enable that? That, I think, is the crucial question. And maybe what I'm hoping is I'm maybe reflecting back something that's on your mind as well.
If it's possible, I mean, I hope it's possible, but at the same time, the realist in me would still assume that, yes, you're right, people are all different in their various ways. Not everybody, though, has to be like a big-brained expert at some various fields. Some people would just like to play around. Some people like to play hide and seek for a living. That's beautiful. That's great.
I mean, one of the great things about democracy, and I'm interrupting you, Gio, but let me just say, one of the great things about democracy, a well-functioning democracy enables people to flourish, even if they're crap at politics and they don't give a damn. They can still flourish politically.
That's a bad thing about democracy, actually.
I mean, it's a system made by geniuses to be run by idiots, right? And I think that's part of it. But you say, look, anyway, Gio, I've interrupted you, and I should go in a moment.
Ahead, please, go ahead, please. I know you have limited time.
I think that's, this challenge is, what do you do? How do you construct a place or a world in which people can truly think freely? Wikipedia was one of the early examples in which this happened. How do you construct that world where you also don't have to be this crazily guarded epistemic creature? You can, just play around and enjoy yourself, go online, and you're not going to get sucked into some crazy vortex that's going to destroy your life. How do you set that up?
Doesn't have to be an expert at Kolmogorov complicity.
That's a great Freudian slip, Kolmogorov complicity.
Oh, that was the
Kolmogorov complicity. That's great. I'm in.
No, that's the term. Look it up. That was.
Oh, you're talking about Scott Aronson's Kolmogorov.
About Kolmogorov teaching people to state things in the way that's acceptable to the party.
Yeah, acceptable to power. So I really appreciate this. I'm being a bit naughty and sort of taking my leave, but Lev and Gio and Chaos, I really
Simon,
appreciate
thank you so much. I am going to show your Twitter right now.
Again,
thank you
please.
so much.
Don't. No, this is just pure pleasure. It's something in quarantine. I would love to have had this in person.
You're allowed to sign off. You have the right of exit.
I disavow everything associated with that phrase, but I wish you all very much.
Oh no!
Best of luck. So
take care, Simon. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Ciao, ciao.
And guys, don't forget to subscribe to BTR. Keep on subscribing. Keep on subscribing. Now we are
I feel like I need a cigarette.
Now we're gonna focus back on Chaos Prime. That was a very interesting conversation. But again, it's like that's the thing that I still like.
I think what's fascinating to me is that Simon is probably in keeping with certain academic orthodoxies, politically at least, but he's willing to entertain, not just entertain, but truly grapple with the stuff that we're saying. And it's, wow, that's powerful.
Absolutely it is.
Wow. But as far as somebody who's actually willing to, have the conversation instead of busting out the torches and pitchforks.
Yeah.
I know that's a cliche point. That's a fucking cliche point.
But as far as what Simon, go on, Gio.
That's the vibe that we're trying to go for at BTR. So.
Yeah, this is what BTR does. But as far as what Simon was talking about with, encouraging people to think for themselves, I mean, I hope that could happen. But again, like, I just don't know, like, how many people out there in the world who are just, I hope they'll go to a higher level, but I just can't say that everybody's going to go to that high of a level. And that's like,
but that's the fundamental.
It bothers me. Like, I don't know what to do about that.
It's like, it reminds me, and again, this is revealing my age as the 28-year-old boomer, but I remember, like, I was old enough to remember the news snippets during the Bush era where he said, what was the phrase? in order to protect democracy, we have to like violate certain institutions of and he was talking about the war on terror. But oh, is that your cat, Lev?
Yeah, that's Steve. Here
Oh,
he is
Steve.
finally. He came in because I have my window open. He always likes the open windows.
My
Here he
neighbor
is.
had a jet black cat almost exactly like that, but it had like apparently certain like female cats, when you fix them, their weight goes out of control, and it was almost close to 30 pounds, my neighbor's cat.
Wow.
Jet black, yeah. Her name was Lucky. Um anyways, yeah, so it reminds me of like that war on terror narrative of like, in order to protect Western democracy, we have to like in some ways violate the fundamental rules that we've set out for ourselves. And in a way, it's like thinking of like
We
constructing
voluntarily give up our freedoms in order to protect them from our enemies who want to take them from us.
Yeah, exactly. So in a way, you could see this framing around like discourse in the internet age and in the information society, how we have to sort of like protect these institutions from it's like the paradox of tolerance stuff, but it's deeper than that. It's like we have to protect we have to, in order to protect the freedom that we have of discourse, we have to like violate certain like dissident voices in order to do that, because we can't have this like total cacophony of voices the way that, you know, things operate within like the difference between media versus the difference between like happenings on the internet. Like I remember Don Jolly had a great video on this where he was talking about, you know, boomers grew up with like the news and Walter Cronkite, and it's like the one, like you could only absorb information unless like, I don't know, they took like letters to the editor, but who fucking cares, right? Because they vetted them. But the internet is like very much, you know, multi-perspectival entity of like, now you create the very like narrative that you're consuming. It's like I can go to like some of my favorite posters or YouTubers and be like, hey, you're full of shit, or hey, I love you. You know, I could literally DM 0 HP Lovecraft and be like, hey, I love this part of your story. I know I'm like, you know, I know I'm sucking his dick, but like, you know what I mean? Like it's a different experience in terms of the way people transform information themselves and process it. You know what? I know. I'm just. And by the way, Apathata, yes, I hope Don Jolly's doing well. I hope he comes back to YouTube, and we have to get him on BTR. I would love to talk to Don Jolly. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Chaos Prime. I hope I didn't cut you off.
I wasn't trying to say something.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I get lost in my own.
Oh, we got $5. We got $5 from
finally,
college
yeah.
from College Reactionary. The very ignorance and depravity that are used as obscene and bizarre slander are their own release from the social pressure that exists to repress them. Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing examples of that. But again, here we're talking about how the system reacts to reactionaries, kind of like college reactionary, probably. I don't know, I'm just assuming that. But for me, it's more of a focus on like what kind of positive examples can people who are, let's say, and I know that Simon's not a fan of using like the word level, stuff like that, but in general, like people who are more on the top hierarchically, however, you know, pillars of the community, whatever you want to say, how can we make sure that they would have a positive influence, if they even matter a damn anymore, on the people who are, let's say, looking up to them? Because for me, it again is more about, there are going to be certain people who are going to yearn for other people to tell them how to act, and maybe that's not the best way, but I can't just pretend that that doesn't happen. So for those people who are going to be like that, how do we make sure that they're not going to be succumbing to negative influences, to the kind of influences that would lead them, you know, to have the kind of life that's not going to have that much satisfaction? You could say, well, who am I to say, you know, what makes for a satisfying life? But I don't know, that's the tricky part for me. I don't know. Like, do some people, let's say, have more of a legitimacy to say, like, if you live this kind of life, it's going to be more satisfying most of the time? You know, like, they probably have to know the person and their community and their family, but in general, certain assumptions like this could be made for people to follow if they don't want to pursue a certain specialized craft or profession. I don't know.
This whole conversation is, sorry, I just want to like interject really quick, but we're talking a lot about kind of like a sort of like patronal attitude towards people, and like how do you uplift them. But I think there's another aspect of that as well, where if you're really trying to give people that I don't know, intellectual freedom or whatever, or if you're like trying to actually give them autonomy to make their own choices about things, then you have to step back in a certain way. Or the most that you can do is, build a space for them to exercise freedom, which is where these private spaces are, or anonymity is. And then you can also equip them with tools that they are, able to use or not in order to kind of pursue their own goals. And so I think that's probably kind of like Chaos, your whole cognitive arms dealer thing is, I think, directly kind of playing that role of not so much taking on like, I'm going to make the world better for you, but more like going to enable you to accomplish what you see is best for yourself. At least that's how I've kind of seen your persona, we'll say.
Oh, and before Chaos responds, you respond $5 from Super Iron Bob. Thank you, Super Iron Bob. He says hashtag bring back noblesse oblige. So yes, curious if yeah.
Yes.
So Chaos, go for it, brother.
Wow, I completely just the thing we were talking about flew out of my head. Okay, so yeah, but right, giving people tools, and if somebody is pursuing their life in a certain fashion, then they have options, like really available options to do it some other way. Like, isn't that, prima facie evidence that, they find the way they're doing it more satisfying than otherwise? Like, even if, somebody is like spending their life diving into, some kind of like fevered nonsense like Q, like, I can see how people would get a tremendous amount of legitimate satisfaction in their lives from engaging with Q. Like, they're feeling that they are part of, an important thing that is happening in the world. They're fighting evil. They're, looking behind the curtain and seeing things that other people don't have the intelligence or the courage to see, or the fortitude to look at. That sounds like a fucking fountain of dopamine. Like,
Or what about crack? Or what about heroin? Like, people can get into all sorts of things that are going to be satisfying to them for the immediate moment, but wasn't like, what's like the Aristotelian, idea of a good life? It's like looking back at the whole thing and then being able to say, whether it was accomplished in such a way as to be satisfying. I know that's kind of like a clinical way of looking at it. I don't really mean to say that's the only way to look at it, but the idea here is that we could objectively say that, yes, if you like spend your whole teen years, doing drugs all the time, it may be fun, but then eventually you're going to get to a really crappy state in your life that you're going to have to kind of like work out to get out of that pit. So in that sense, if there was
an arms dealing perspective on that, would be to say that, we should give people the tools to have a coherent idea of what outcomes they can expect from courses of action that they're looking at, and, like, make a legitimate choice about whether to do that. And like, rather than like going to a party and having somebody be like, hey, stick this needle in your arm, it'll be fun. And like, now you've got Jones or whatever. And,
well,
and that gets complicated with, the agency of children, and like, really like people under at least the age of 22. There was extensive evidence of the, impaired time preference and so on that comes with that. So, does that justify like some level of coercion to, just simply prevent people from making the choices that, like, we as their caretakers and so on, think are not going to be good for them? Some real hardcore anarchists say no, that, we need, total child autonomy.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah, the child liberation people. I've had a thread about them where that leads to, but That's away from the conversation we're having. Right?
No, but it's
that's
kind of
another episode.
No, but it's a mirror projection of like the other side of it, where people are afraid that if there isn't this kind of order, then child liberation, all this crazy stuff, that's what's going to happen. And I guess the thing with me is that I am conflicted on whether any of these things are. I think that things move the way they move. There's not that much power that we have, except for like, certain circles of people that listen to us or BTR or whatever, who I hope will get inspired doing things in their own life to improve themselves, their families, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, we're still dealing with a lot of people in the world. And so I think that people who are, let's say, leaning more into some authoritarian direction would be thinking like, hey, maybe we can put the genie in the bottle. Maybe we can have like some kind of a trad authoritarian system that, there's not going to be that many chaos primes in the world, but there are at least going to be enough asshole teachers that will keep all the kids in line in this authoritarian system as they think. And that's why we have to go back to this kind of system. And at least that way it's going to function, the way it should function and all that stuff. Like, and I'm not a fan of that. I can see a lot of problems there. But at the same time, do you see like where I'm reaching here as far as they're not anticipating every school teacher is going to be as interesting as you, Chaos? Like, they may be anticipating that people are going to act the way they do, but we're just going to have to apply some societal pressure from the top to make sure that people don't scurry away and do their own thing, and then you will have like this cohesive society, which again, I don't think it's going to work that way, but that seems to be the approach that people are taking, or at least if I were to go in their minds, I think that would be the approach. Do you notice that too, or do you think this is just my own?
A sort of reaction that's happening where like it's like, oh no, everything is spinning out of control, so we need to go into this clamp down model that's vaguely like how I imagined it was at some point, or I mean, are there people who still remember having childhoods that were very, very regimented? I guess there must be some still around.
But that also comes down to the thing that I don't understand when it comes to like my childhood. It was regimented in some sense, but I think my parents may be pretty close to you in the sense that they were always for me thinking critically, and they were never like, because I said so. They were always trying to explain as best as they can why certain things are happening the way that they are happening. And I think that that's a great blessing. But what I don't know is like, how many people are there in general? Like, forget the teachers, just like focus on the family here. How many families are there in general who would even be able to explain these things beyond the because I said so? How many families would just operate based on, like, this thing worked, this thing was a thing that my parents did, so I'm going to do the same thing? And I guess the question for me is, if not for these parents who wouldn't be the brightest, if not for them, what would be the alternative for these kids who, again, because maybe they're not going to be thinking as critically, maybe they're going to go off and just, I don't know, just do a bunch of drugs, ruin their life, whatever, if not for this, like, solid force that only knows whatever, tradition was passed down to them by their forefathers and so on and so forth.
Well, Simon talked about institutions, which, seems like a really interesting thought there. Can we imagine new forms of institution that would, provide some sort of, influence or structure on, people's lives like that? Can we imagine ones that, people would have options to choose between? Something cognitive syndicalism.
That's an interesting term. Yeah, I don't know.
Are not public intellectuals essentially working to nominate themselves to be cognitive syndics?
But that's curious though. I think that it goes like to the thesis of like the death of the public intellectual, because is it the power of the public intellectual to provoke thought, but now it's like a conscious like heel turn where they're limiting thought? So I don't know. It's it's interesting, or rather is it that, the public intellectual is dead because now everyone can be a public intellectual? So it's like, it's not that we have a lack of meaning, it's that we have a hyper proliferation of meaning that's like choking everyone, like a constant stream of
But it's not
useless
but it's not
information.
created. Yeah, but it's not created equal, because some information is going to be a lot more noise than signal, which again is why I understand why Simon thinks that my reasoning is dangerous when it comes to classifying. And again, my classification has nothing to do at all with anything that you were born with. Basically, just like in general, how many people are going to be out there that are going to be pursuing their own intellectual curiosity interests, and how many people are just going to be going along with the program. Is that changeable? I hope so in certain respects, but I still think there are going to be a lot more people that are just going to go with the flow of whatever's going on. So again, like for them,
Shouldn't that be an option that people have? Shouldn't people be able to be like, yeah, I don't really want to, fuck around with all this deep shit y'all are on about. Like, I just want to chill.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that I think is very important too, which again goes back to my point of, if there are going to be more people who just want to chill and play and all that, that's all great, but it's like society would still have to function in a certain way to make sure that, people don't just chill out all day. Or I guess, fuck it. Like, if we go back to some neo-agrarian lifestyle, then maybe people could, like, grow food and then chill the fuck out. But then again, it's, like, so tremendously difficult to farm. Like, remember we had Regan Lodge on the show, and he was talking about that, like, how people have this idyllic view of farming. But at the end of the episode, though, after the stream was over, I did kind of get some information from him pointing to maybe there could be a way to have like farms that are closer together so that communities can be closer together, and maybe the farm doesn't have to grow that much food. Like maybe it can grow just like a certain percentage, and it'll be mostly like part of it for themselves, and they'll get food from somebody else. But the reason why I'm mentioning all this, like, what does all this have to do with anything we talked about before? For me, it just has to do with how do we have some kind of harmony and satisfaction. And you could say, well, who needs satisfaction? It's like, I don't know. I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people are kind of miserable right now, and there could be better ways of doing this. And my whole thing is, I don't think it should require people to be in the lives of these people who are going to be that knowledgeable, because I don't know if we're going to be able to have that many people out there like that. So there would have to be some other kind of like default way, traditional way, or whatever you want to call it, that people would be able to interact in society.
Is what we're getting toward here going to wind up being Diamond Age Files?
What's Diamond Age Files?
From Neil Stephenson's The Diamond Age.
Oh, I didn't read
the
that
example
one yet.
was the Vickies, the Neo-Victorians. Where basically we're having like social groupings that are like participating in a broad pluralistic society, but the social grouping itself is very like tight knit, and has a very specific way they do things and a set of traditions. That like this is what we do, and like I mean. I don't know if they have syndics, but it does kind of go to the the syndicalistic sort of structure that I'm talking about, where there is no single way that this whole society behaves, but there are a lot of like specific ways of life that you have the option to choose between. That's being imagined there.
But
I think
and
Bard
again,
was talking about that too, right?
But again, like I don't mean to like NRX post, but like that's Geo's path is pre-scripted. Oh my god. Maybe. No, I think that was a product of like the social technology of liberalism being able to shove like all of the quote unquote problematic thought patterns and endeavors of human existence into the private sphere, and the public sphere is like this ideology that lacks an ideology, a sort of like depoliticized bureaucratic managerial state that can create like public like non-space avenues for like like almost like a mental non-space where like this bureaucratic proceduralism of the PMC class, you could say, like that becomes like this non-space of compliance where like
would that be liberalism or leftism though?
What did you say?
would that be liberalism or more leftism? Because
No, because this is like basic managerial neoliberal state stuff, which I mean, I guess to like someone on the right, I guess could come off as being liberal, but I mean left wing. But like that's the point is like this is the we're talking in terms of like this social technology of the public-private sphere that was designed to manage all of these like very deeply contradictory ways of life between people, right? So,
but what does that have to do with liberalism in general? Like, I don't know. I'm gonna be
that was the promise of
liberalism. Liberalism needs an agora. Like
Yeah.
there has to be some kind of common space where
yes, for
the
people.
pluralistic society can interact.
Yeah, like the agora mentioned in ancient Greece. But what I don't get here is that was it liberalism necessarily that brought it about? Wouldn't it be the same to say, well, it was like the Industrial Revolution which brought it about, or it was like the printing
but
press
that's a
that
good
brought it
question
about?
because, like, the chicken or the egg, right? Because if it wasn't for certain advances in technology, then you could say the massification of any social group wouldn't have taken place. Ergo, you know, every society prior to like liberal modernity, you could say, didn't have. I mean, they had a notion of a separation of different avenues of existence, but not to the extent of like the strictly legalistic like public-private sphere that was in some ways largely a product of like technology and the expansion, not just technology but also urbanization that is correlated, you know, like I mean if it wasn't for urbanization, for instance, that wouldn't have taken place because rural agrarian life is so heavily dependent on you not being separate, like your existence not being separate from the group, right? So that
I mean, speaking of urbanization, though, and like where the word literally comes from, didn't the Roman Empire do pretty well with that? I mean, they had a pluralistic
the
society,
Greeks before that, yeah.
largely based on like a central set of laws rather than.
Well, if you go to Giorgiani, I mean, that's like cosmopolitanism is like even more ancient, right? So,
Well, he'd put that in Atlantis. You know, he'd put that in like all the antediluvian
Agartha.
civilizations. Yeah, but it is an interesting thing where you would have
Phoenicians.
these. Yeah,
Phoenicians, yes,
well,
yeah.
Where you would have these ancient civilizations that got extinct and the survivors came back and like spread civilization around. And it was like this hyper autistic civilization that would have existed that would have known all these star patterns and you know like it's a very interesting thing for me to think about. But it is also interesting how people see the United States as being kind of like a continuation of it, like a new Atlantis, like some kind of a John Dee inspired.
Well, that is his vision of like a Promethean future is like basically Eurasianism for Americans, which is, but then it's like we're gonna have like this alliance between Eurasia, Iran, and America, and it's gonna be like the superpowers against like the forces of regression. But I don't know, it is true, but my problem is, like, of course, like academic presentism, where like they mine certain concepts from the past, and they're like, well, you know, it's true that the Romans actually did have multiculturalism like we do in Canada over here. It's the same thing. It's totally the same as Canadian, like Pierre Trudeau invented state-enforced multiculturalism. So
my favorite.
I mean, I talk smack, but like, yes, it is true. For those in the chat, I am a product of fucking Canadian multiculturalism because, well, not really. I mean, when my Italian ancestors came here, they didn't have a good. Put it this way, they didn't have a good time about it. But that's neither here nor there. But, well, you know.
I like this Roman emperor over here. I don't remember what his name is, but he looks like George Clooney.
Oh, show the one that looks like Paul Sorvino.
I don't know the one you're talking about.
The meme one recently, the one that blew up on
Wait,
Twitter.
the chubby looking weird one.
Yeah. Looks
Okay,
like 90s era Paul Sorvino from Goodfellas.
Okay, I gotta find that one. But I don't know. If we're talking about the Romans and the Greeks and how they had these similar systems, like liberalism to me is still this idea of having an open door for people to be able to try out, different things in life and not be held back by, having been born in a particular caste or class or something like that. And I think that that's actually a healthy system because at the end of the day, this is something that would enable a new upper class to flourish from, you know, having new blood get introduced into it from other people. You know what I mean? Like, I think it is a healthy thing to have the elites, you know, be changed over time. And a liberal system would allow for something like that to happen. Now, the problems that we have right now with whatever you want to call it, neoliberalism or whatever, like, I don't know if I should necessarily blame these things or like liberalism for that, or if I would, then wouldn't I blame all the other, you know, technology and all the other things that have occurred over time to get us to this point as well? Like, I don't think we should necessarily throw out the baby with the bathwater over here, because again, whatever alternative there is, if we're talking about like Mussolini, for instance, the Mussolini, from what I understand, of, you know, later period was not the same Mussolini of the earlier. His position changed him, being that, you know, Duce changed the way that he thought, you know, like I think he was a much smarter person before, and then the decisions that he ended up making, you know, if the younger Mussolini had a time machine and could go forward in time to the older Mussolini, like, I wonder what he would say to him. You know, like, and that's, for me, an example of how much being within an authoritarian system would completely change a person, regardless of any ideas that he has.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, I don't think that these
Strong Marxist argument. Material conditions.
Yeah. No, I mean, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that is something that I would ascribe to these kind of systems, which is, again, why. And I know that Churchill, you know, people don't like hearing about Churchill for some reason on BTR, but I do like his quote about democracy being like, you know, a horrible system, but like the best one we have or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, and again, like, not full democracy, I know representative democracy, but the system, I think, is one that should be flexible enough not to create these demagogues that would have an, you know, top-down control over things, because they're not going to end well. I don't know any example of recent history where such a system ended well, and I can't compare the history of like the ancient Greeks and the Romans to now, because it was a different time.
I mean,
maybe back then, for that time,
to have ended well, right?
What?
If it ends, we probably don't consider it to have ended well.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, that's. I mean, I know, Gio, you talked about how, well, like, fascism, it didn't really get a chance to exist for that long. But again, like, with the changes that went on through Mussolini himself,
was
in that
destroyed from
system,
the outside as opposed to the inside. That was.
but
Again,
not
that
with,
was BAP's argument. That's the.
yes,
I was
but
just
not with,
plagiarizing.
but not with Mussolini. As far as it wasn't just from the outside; it was from the inside too. Here, with Mussolini changing, like I said before, so it was both in that case. And I don't really see this top-down, like, even in China. I wonder how long Xi Jinping would be able to last, as opposed to the more flexible system they had before, where the elites were replaced on a pretty regular basis by new ones. So,
well, what's your take on Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore?
Well, that's the same take that I would have on a socialist, quote-unquote, socialist Nordic country. You know, you can have like these little ass countries where different experiments are done that can work out well due to the size of it. And as far as Lee Kuan Yew, I mean, obviously in Singapore, not a homogeneous country. We have, you know, Indian people, we have Chinese people.
But they know, like, who rules the place is really.
Yes, exactly. But I don't see something like that being able to be done on a wider scale.
Sorry, Singapore. Yeah, sorry.
Again, like the family unit, that's an example of like a certain amount of authoritarian rule if you're talking about like the parents ruling over the children. But then try to expand that on a wider basis, and the wider and wider you get, I'm not sure how sustainable something like that is going to be in the long term. But like, again, I know it's a hackneyed thing to say, but like, power corrupts you know, ultimate power. You get the idea. Like, I think that that would apply to larger scales. With Singapore, here's the thing: I would never want to live in Singapore, because if somebody plants some drugs on me, then I'm done. I'm like, so I don't want to do that. Nor do I think you would want to do that if you consider these kinds of ramifications. Not even because you do drugs, but in case somebody plants the drugs on you, then you're a goner. you know. So that's why I don't want to live in the system like that.
Fair. So would you think that we should just balkanize the hell out of everything so that we can try lots of different stuff?
Like patchwork?
Oh
Yeah,
God.
exactly.
No, I don't know. I mean, when it comes to balkanization, that would also create a lot of little Singapores within, you know, controlled by some. Like, imagine if Dan Schneider had his own kingdom. You know, like he would just like create like the Nickelodeon Foot Kingdom, and just like
Oh, God.
have all these child slaves. And you know what I mean? Like that shit can
Epstein
happen.
Island, but like
Oh,
I forget who tweeted it out. I think it must have been it could have been Menace, where he's like you know, give the Epstein, give Little St. James back to the indigenous pedophiles that lived there before Epstein. So
I think that was Nick Mullen.
oh, Nick Mullen, that was the Nick Mullen. Yeah, that
sounds
was.
like Nick Mullen, yeah.
Oh God.
But
It's kind of late where I am.
I know we
So I
gotta
don't know
go
about you
soon.
guys,
But just
Yeah, probably about time to wrap it up.
it is time to wrap it up. But one last thing I just wanted to draw out here with this.
is there a
patchwork.
show on Thursday or Friday, Lev?
There is a show on Thursday. Yes, let's actually do that first. So, guys, we are going to be having a lot of interesting things coming up. We are going to have a show on Thursday, March 11th. Alexander Bard is back with us.
Oh.
We are going to be having a show about Europe, the EU, and we are going to have the following people in there. We're going to have Andrzej Kolzowski. Martin Kay is going to be on the show as well, big Alexander Bard fanboy. We are going to have Gareth Millward joining us as well, and Gareth is a historian at Warwick University's History Department, a Welcome Fellow working on sick notes, vaccinating Britain. Okay, and then we have Ronan McRae also joining us. He studied law and later politics and is now a professor of constitutional and European law at the University College London. And we are also going to be joined by Anne Elizabeth Moutet, who I had a great conversation with, and she is French. She's actually originally from Russia, and part of her family, like from like part of the imperial, you know, anyway, I'm not going to get into it right now, but anyway, she works for The Telegraph, 28 Minutes, Arte TV, Unheard, Cap X, BBC, New York Post, adopted by 2 cats. There we go. So Anne Moutet,
And also,
yeah.
if someone knows him, we would also appreciate Nicolo Salo to come on that
That
one
would be
about
cool.
European politics. That'd be cool. That'd be a good pipe bomb in the conversation.
Yes. And we are going to have John Stokes on Tuesday, March 16th. He is the founder of Ars Technica. We are also going to be joined for that by Catherine Brodsky. Andrea Seabrook is back with us for that one. And we are also going to have Indian Bronson. He's going to be joining us for that one as well. And, okay, I'm trying to get in touch with Daniel Pinchbeck and figure out when the psychedelic stream is happening. That is still adjusting right now. So Thursday, March 18th, it could either be the psychedelic stream or it could end up being something else. What could it end up being? It could end up being a stream with Sonia supposedly, a Sowing Discourse with Sonia supposedly. So hopefully we're going to be able to make that happen, and I'm going to find out real soon. Then we're going to have Tuesday, March 23, Sean Lang, our friend Sean Lang is going to be back with us to talk some history. Thursday, March 25, we are going to be Sowing Discourse with Grit Cult. The BTR Grit Cult scissoring is afoot, and we are gonna have we're gonna have an entertainment stream Thursday, April 1, with Chris Gore, who is the founder of Film Threat. He's gonna be joining us along with my friend, the great animator Patrick Smith, and Catherine Brodsky is joining us as well. So there we go. A couple of more things. Alex Kashuda, Thursday, April 8th. We are going to have a stream on, let's see. Well, all these things are just like down the line, so I'm not going to get into them right now, or I could get into this one over here. So we are also going to have a stream on the future of governance and liberty. 2 of the guests who have confirmed right now are Mark Terrell. He is the founder of Undavos, author of Scaling. He is a World Economic Forum tech pioneer from 2008, and now is a World Economic Forum young leader alumni. So we are also gonna have him, and we are gonna have Garrett Jones, macroeconomist at George Mason University, author of 10% Less Democracy. So
that's gonna be. I think we're gonna have to censor the chat for that one, Lev.
I don't know. I have faith in the chat. I'm a chat respecter.
A literal Davos person. Oh my
no,
God.
he's great. I met him on Clubhouse. He's great.
Of course you met him on Clubhouse. Of course.
No, this is
Someone
what we do.
said Clubhouse is like LinkedIn with a Discord feature. That could be true.
Yes,
but...
no, this is what BTR does. We want to bring all these worlds together and just get to the bottom of, why don't people like the Great Reset? No, I want to find everything out. This is what we do.
What's not to like about the Great Reset?
So
we should get, oh my God, we should get James Corbett Report for that one, and he could like grill an actual Davis person. That'd be amazing.
No. Let's go again. As long as everybody's respectful, then I am for it. Oh, and also we're gonna have a stream May 4th on conservatism, and one of the people who has already signed up is Libby Emmons, and she's an editor at the Post Millennial, writer for the Federalist, New York Post, Quillette, Unheard, Spectator USA, American Conservative.
I'm gonna be dragging myself. Jesus.
So there we go, guys. I'm bringing in a lot of interesting people together. This is what we do. So I'm so grateful and thankful for everybody being here. Just one last thing about the patchwork thing. The other important thing I think is that look, I don't want to get into it too deeply right now, but it's noticeable, at least to me, that there are certain standards we would apply for countries that are, despite all the relative corruption and stuff like that, there are still countries that are like democracies, republics, whatever you want to call it, relatively free countries. And for those relatively free countries that support each other, I don't want them to be split up and fractionalized in such a way that there would be like demagogues that would be controlling like little sectors here and there. You know what I mean? I'm not a big fan of that, which is why I don't think that model we're talking about would necessarily work in the long term. So I don't know what the solution is, but that is just one critique that I would have of it. And I don't know, like Chaos, if you would, or Ostaf or Gio or anybody else, if there are any more thoughts in that manner. But otherwise, we're going to finish off the stream. So let me know.
I think we're kind of like talking about two different things at once, where we're talking about the viability of a society and then also the humane aspect of it, right? And so there's like a degree of the freedoms that you want, or the pro-social network maybe, that if you're not careful, you're going to build something really fragile, and then you've got the quokkas, where you just get steamrolled by whatever superior mimetic forces out there to take you over. And I think that's kind of like, I think the patchwork model devolves into that too, where there's going to be states that are stronger than other ones. And I'm kind of a sucker for this Dawkinsian kind of mimetic framework. I think in that way a lot, but like it's just a system of evolutionary competition where the stronger states are going to outcompete the other ones and eat them, absorb them, and then pretty soon you're going to be left with something, again, very similar to the world as it stands today, just in terms of there being big nations which are structured kind of like this, and then there's smaller nations which are maybe a little bit more variance, but
so what I heard you saying is that we need deeper ecological niches.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, something that technology, or people who are like innovating through technology, need to really be focusing on. Is like, how do we broaden in that direction to where we have a much wider range to go over?
Absolutely. And guys, here's the thing. I don't know why
we're kind of entering that with like the fact that people find like massive social media sites intolerable. So it's like we're almost going back to like an older model of the internet of like dark foresting, where it's going to be like, like the forum days, or like the million little islands of the internet. I mean, who knows, right? But
By the way, guys, today in the stream, we got to 3,050, but now I'm looking and I'm seeing 3,045. What the fuck is going on? This is not right. Listen, I need you to subscribe right fucking now. Get the number back up to 50. This is no good. Get the number back up, and I really appreciate all of you. We need to get these subscribers. I don't know what happened. Maybe some of the people, I mean, you don't know how all this works. You know, we could have gotten new people, and then some older people would have been like, you know, fuck this, I don't care about patchwork, I don't care about any of this shit, and they went away. Either way, guys, subscribe to BTR right now. We need your support. And also go to patreon.com/breaktherules. The links are in the description for all of this, as well as our Discord, so become a member of our Discord as well. When you become a patron, by the way, you get access to a super secret part of the Discord server, and you also get access to post images in btr-chat, which I know a lot of people are dying to do. Also, when you become a $20 patron, you are going to get a custom, beautiful wooden magnet created by my father, Alexander Polyakov. The ones that I'm showing off over here, these are a little bit more abstract, but we're going to make ones that are going to be a little bit more solidified, including an inflated lioness and also a definitely legit magnet. So it's going to be like the collie dog as a wooden magnet, and I can't wait for both of them to be done to show them off to everybody. $30 patrons are going to get a beautiful Geo print from the TFW No GF series. Here we have Geo in action. And $50 patrons are going to get all of the above, as well as a completely custom magnet. Whatever you want, we're going to turn that into a wooden magnet. Another beautiful painting, this time from Geo, in the Bob Ross style. Jules Hamilton is going to paint a figure for you, and we are also going to have a bunch more goodies in store, because this is how much we care about you. Oh, it's because you mentioned Davos people? Come the fuck on. This is what we do here at BTR. The point is that we're supposed to bring in people who disagree. So fuck all the haters
I don't know,
who
Lev.
unsubscribed.
Lev, there was probably just a YouTube purge. It's fine.
Yeah, that's what modern hermeticists said, that there's probably YouTube purge.
Oh, man. Well, either way, look, I personally think that having Davos people on is actually an exciting thing, because when else are you going to have the chance to speak with Davos people with, you know, this is like a rare thing. This is a great opportunity.
Purge people that just don't post anything, that just lurk? That's probably what it is. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Well, either way, I really appreciate everybody for being here. Chaos.
Oh, and subscribe to my YouTube channel,
yes,
by the way.
Yes.
Giant Art Productions. I'm almost at 900. I need to get to 1,000 subs before I can unlock all of the grifting techniques. Go and watch my recent, if you just want to chill out, you know, my recent painting video. It's one painting I'm doing for a series of paintings for Man's World magazine. So, yeah, if you just want to like relax for a minute, listen to some great music by Philip Daniel, watch a painting. It's like, you know, why do you watch Bob Ross? Because I don't know.
Exactly. Subscribe to Geo right now.
I should just do that, man. I should just like totally like whore myself out and pump out like a painting, like 2-3 painting videos a week of just Bob Ross landscapes. I can fucking do it. I can just...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be a beautiful thing. And also follow Ostov at Hopeful Abandon over here. So here he is, the beautiful hedgehog in the fog. I'm happy you are a fan of Yuri Norstein. I like his work too. A lot of Japanese people are really obsessed with it too, by the way. Like they just kind of, like there's like a small group of Japanese folks who I heard like went to Yuri Norstein and were just like his disciples, like treated him like some kind of a god. Well, anyway, let's see what else. Oh, and of course, Chaos Prime. I want to promote Chaos. What would you like me to promote right now, brother? I will promote anything you want.
Oh, yeah, still Caves of Code is probably fine. Cavesofqud.com. It's the video game that I work on. Classic roguelike, far future science fantasy setting. All very excellent.
Here is the link to Caves of Qud. Beautiful game. Guys, go there, play the game, subscribe to Chaos Prime, and just let's keep doing this. Let's keep growing. Let's bring on the Davos people. Let's bring on the journalists. Let's bring on all these people, and we're going to do a mass scissoring that's going to create a beautiful Vajra-like explosion in the universe, and this is what we're here for. So anyway,
Is
guys,
this a tantric thing?
everything is tantra, even the weaving of baskets, as Aryan
Cosmic
Cowboy
yoni,
told us.
the yoni.
Exactly, yoni.
There
I
was
like
this
that.
really crazy poem in one of the Alex Gray books called Art Psalms, where he like talks about like, never mind, I'll do a dramatic reading one day on my channel. It's
I love it.
Lev, you know that Vajra means lightning and diamond and penis, right?
Yeah, of course.
Mhm.
I mean, why else would you have these I'm going to show this picture and then that's it. I promise it's the end of the stream. But the Sumerians, you know, like the Sumerian bull statue? You know the one I'm talking about? I know, is it Babylonian? I think it's hold on. It's this one over here. Bull. Hold on. Yes. Hold on, I am almost there. This one. Okay. I want you to pay attention to this photo, and we are going to leave really soon, but here we go. Here's the photo. So the head here. The head doesn't it look like a penis?
Yeah.
There we
a little
go.
bit.
There we go. It's like our head is also a penis because we have the slit over here in the skull, and that's like where the kundalini goes into, and it crosses with the spiritual energy, you know, from the source, which then goes down, like from our 1,000-petal lotus. That is our divine connection, and then it goes down, up and down and up and down and all around. Anyway, guys, this is the end of the stream. Mwah! Good night, everybody.
God bless. Good night.
Kundalini Dragon 1.